evening, and welcome to episode 17 of Tomorrow's World Audit Time. Evening, Mark.
Good evening, Russ. How are you?
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, I must say, I'm feeling a little bit smug this week. Do you know why?
No, I don't, because you did not mention this in our little pre-ramble that we always have. Go on, what's making you smug? No, let's. It's more of a case of what specifically is making you particularly smug this week, Russ. Go on, what is it?
Yeah, I know you're thinking no change there, but no.
Yeah.
Well, you should know, Mark, because you are privy to the same emails that I am to
see,
Tomorrow's World Audit
yes.
Time at gmail.com. Less than 24 hours after putting up the last episode, we received another email from Mr. Howard Stableford. He had gone straight in and listened to our last episode straight away, possibly because he's in it and wanted to check that we didn't libel him or something.
I'm okay
but
with that.
I like to think that it's because he enjoys our podcast. But do you want me to read it out for you, Mark?
Yes, even though you revealed that I've already read it, but go on.
From the desk of Howard Stableford. Hello, Russ and Mark. Thoroughly enjoyed episode 16, although it brought back nightmares of the Robert Gordon Institute's helicopter immersion simulator hell. And then this is the bit that makes me feel smug, Mark.
Yeah.
We did split up the segments on the basis that it was too long, all in one go, and indeed the TV business was meant to be that the lights go out and I reappear in the North Sea. Now, you remember, Mark,
it's something you posited. Yeah, absolutely.
So that bit there, Mark.
Yeah.
You know what it reminded me of? Have you ever seen the film Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film?
Yeah.
There's a bit where he's standing in a queue for a cinema with one of his dates.
Yes.
And the guy, he's getting really annoyed with the guy behind him who's really loudly talking about Marshall McLuhan.
Yeah.
And then Woody Allen breaks the fourth wall. And then he goes over and he actually gets Marshall McLuhan and brings him over. And Marshall McLuhan says to the guy, "You know nothing of my work." And this to me feels like my Marshall McLuhan moment. I've said something, and then the actual man himself, the great man himself, has come forth and proved me correct.
Yep.
So that's why I'm feeling smug, Mark.
No, quite rightly. You were right. You were right. You were correct.
Yeah. Anyway, Howard continues. R.E. Chernobyl. Little did I know that 3 years later, Tomorrow's World would send me there to do a half-hour special, Chernobyl Counting the Cost, which I hope we find one day.
We will definitely.
Which won me a few awards, much to the chagrin of the brown sauce singers. Little winking emoji. I'm glad you got to visit it as well. Pripyat in particular is an extraordinary monument to man's folly. Yours, Howard. So that's nice, isn't it? I feel like Howard's almost like our best friend now.
Which I like a lot, yeah. I hope he's okay with us reading out some of his email. I'm sure he will be.
Yeah.
Because obviously we it's not that we kind of... I suppose because I think we were very generous with the segment on the last episode about Chernobyl, which is that we were very forgiving in the fact that they just didn't know a huge amount. And so as a result, they, not unsurprisingly, slightly underplay exactly how disastrous it was. Hence, obviously, 3 years later, they sent them off to kind of report on the full weight and breadth of disaster there. And actually, I have to say, when that email came in, I got incredibly excited. I would love to see that, because, we were there 20 years later?
Yeah.
To go there 3 years? I mean, was the sarcophagus even completed then?
Imagine how radioactive the moss was
exactly.
then.
Oh, my God.
That's a bit thinking about.
We have got to track that down. We have got to see if we can find it somewhere. Yeah. No, what a joy. What a joy that was to receive.
Yeah. And, hopefully... hopefully Howard stays in touch, and hopefully, we might get some emails from other Tomorrow's World presenters in the future. Not naming any names, but So, this episode, Mark, this is our second earliest episode ever. There's not many episodes available from the era of the BBC wiping tapes. It's quite sort of slim pickings is what we can find, but we managed to find this episode, which is from the 18th of December 1970. I looked up what happened around the 18th of December 1970, and it turns out that this weekend was the weekend that Elvis Presley decided to visit the White House and visit Richard Nixon, which I thought was a good thing to link it to. Well, I'm a big fan of Elvis. I've been to Graceland twice. And Mark, you're something of, I don't think we've revealed this before, but you're something of the Nixon aficionado, aren't you?
Yeah, fan would be the wrong word, Russ, but yeah. Definitely an aficionado. Yeah, I've long been fascinated by the life and works of Richard Milhous Nixon. He's come up before. We've discussed him slightly, but no, I mean when you said that, because it was the 21st of December that Elvis turned up at the White House, and no, I was delighted when you said that this was connected, because it's a really interesting and weird day in the history of both rock music and politics.
I looked up a quick rundown of the events, and I thought I'd just go in case anybody doesn't know about this incident. There's actually 2 films about it. There's a recent one which was quite well known called Elvis and Nixon, which stars Kevin Spacey and Michael Shannon, which is quite a strange bit of stunt casting for Elvis. I quite enjoyed Kevin Spacey's impression of Nixon in that.
It was good. It was good.
But there's actually, I think, a better version, which is a 1997 Canadian TV movie called Elvis Meets Nixon, which actually has some little interviews with the people involved. So the people that still
faux interviews. Let's be honest. Yeah. It's a nice little conceit, though.
But no, it's really entertaining. But
we watched them both for research purposes, didn't we?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, to familiarise ourselves with the era.
Yeah.
But this quick little rundown of actually what the chain of events, right? So December the 19th, the day after this Tomorrow's World went out, Elvis had an argument with his wife and his dad about the amount he was spending on Christmas presents. Because it turned out that he had spent over $100,000 on 32 handguns and 10 Mercedes-Benzes. Right.
Which is incredible.
So, yeah, after this argument, Elvis is a bit miffed about things. So
Can I just add, because one of the films suggests that Colonel Tom Parker was earning 50% of all Elvis's income, because in one of the films, the Canadian TV film, his dad goes like, well, he just had a word with this, and he kind of said, like, after all he's done, he deserves a raise.
So anyway,
money for old rope. Brilliant.
So Elvis storms out the house, gets in his car, and goes to the airport. And this is apparently the first time that Elvis has ever left the house and gone off on his own since he was 21.
21, yeah, 1956. They said.
Yeah, and he's currently 35 at the time. So he goes to the airport and he says, "I want to get on the first plane out of here." And that first plane happens to be to Washington DC. So he flies to DC, checks into the Hotel Washington, immediately gets bored because he's just on his own in DC. So then decides to fly to LA, where his mate Jerry Schilling is a talent manager and member of the so-called Memphis Mafia. He's there. So he goes over to meet Jerry, and like Elvis is carrying with him his collection of honorary police badges, which he used to carry around, and a load of guns, which you could just carry onto aeroplanes at the time. But then while he's there, he's thinking about these police badges and stuff, and he decides that he wants to get a badge from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, which is the forerunner to the what's now the DEA. And I got this quote from Priscilla, his wife, because I think there's this sense that he just wanted to be a law enforcement operative. But Priscilla reckons in her autobiography that he actually wanted that badge so that he could legally enter any country, both wearing guns and carrying any drugs he wished, which sounds like a more feasible explanation to me. But yeah, I don't know, who knows. But yeah, so he decides to fly back to Washington DC, and while he's on that flight, he bumps into Senator George Murphy, and he's telling him about this. And George Murphy says, "Well, why don't you, probably trying to get rid of Elvis, why don't you just write a letter to Richard Nixon about it?" And Richard, and so Elvis just immediately gets some notepaper from the air hostess and writes Nixon a letter there and then. And you can go online and you can see the letter itself on the what is that?
The National Archives, I think it's at the Nixon Presidential Museum, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
No, because one thing I did was, obviously you looked up Priscilla Presley's biography. I have more than the average number of Nixon books in this house. So I don't know what the average is, 3 or 4, I'm guessing, but I do have more than the average number. A lot of them are actually quite subject specific, so I don't have a huge amount of biographies. So I looked up Elvis Presley and the ones that I had, and actually, funny enough, it's interesting because we watched 2 films, a grand total of, I think, running time of like 3 hours. And I can only find 4 pages in all the books that I have about this thing, but one of them reprints the letter, which is just absolutely amazing. But you can see the real letter online, obviously, because once material goes into the White House, it then becomes automatically archived.
Yes, but yeah. But then I think the best part of this story is like Elvis doesn't post it. He literally, him and Jerry land in Washington, and they get a limo straight to the White House. and Elvis delivers it by hand at 6:30 a.m. on the 21st of December. So this is the following Monday from this episode of Tomorrow's World. Luckily for Elvis, one of Richard Nixon's aides is a big Elvis fan. Sees this letter and goes, "This is a great idea. Let's get Elvis in the building," and manages to pull some strings. And by noon that day, Elvis is in the White House meeting Richard Nixon, which I love. I think it's such a brilliant combination of a man so famous that he has almost unlimited power, but also clearly so sort of naive and childlike in his approach to things that he just almost seems like he can just do whatever he wants, like a kid would think the world works. But Elvis got to meet Nixon. He went into the Oval Office and met him. I think one of the things they bonded over was that Elvis suggested that the Beatles and their sort of their drug taking and things was a kind of anti-American, was causing the breakdown of American society.
I've got a quote here. The Beatles, I think, are kind of anti-American. They came over here, made a lot of money, and then went back to England, and they said some anti-American stuff when they got back. You know, the president said, those who use drugs are the protesters. You know, the ones who get caught up with dissent and violence. He also didn't like their hair, Nixon.
So, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so I think they kind of sort of bonded in however much the personalities of Elvis and Nixon could bond. And so Nixon decided to grant Elvis's wish and get him one of these drug enforcement agent badges. And Elvis was absolutely delighted, gave Nixon a hug. Nixon gave Elvis a pair of White House cufflinks and a brooch for Priscilla. And Elvis flew back home. But he asked for that meeting to be kept secret. It was not to be publicised at the time. And no one really heard about it. One guy reported it in a newspaper about a year later, but nobody really talked about it. It was only when the National Archives, in 1988, the National Archives announced that they were selling copies of the photo. There's a famous photo of them shaking hands in the Oval Office. And suddenly everyone went mad for it. I don't know whether to this day it is, but it certainly was, for a long time, the most requested photo in the history of the National Archives. And I guess that's why people decided to make films about it. But I think it's a great story.
It is a great story. I have to say, I mean, one of the details, it was interesting watching the films back to back because they share quite a lot in common, obviously, because they've only got a limited amount of material that they can use. So it was interesting seeing, and actually it's funny, whoever plays Presley in the Canadian film, I thought was really good. Had that kind of sweet naivety to him. Whereas I really like Michael Shannon. I really do like Michael Shannon. I think he's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. He was not a great Elvis, because in a sense you kind of want people to do an impression of Elvis. Yeah. Whereas Kevin Spacey's Nixon was so much better than the Canadian TV version.
I'm an absolute sucker for a Nixon impression, though. I love it's one of the great impressions, isn't it? Like some people could do it better than others, but I always enjoy, no matter how good or bad a Nixon impression, I always enjoy it.
What I think he did well was that Nixon was really intelligent. He was not in the first film, he's a bit of a doofus, he's a bit of a kind of a bumbling idiot, he's kind of swivel-eyed loon. It's no, Nixon really was an incredibly intelligent individual. He had no emotional intelligence. Up until recently, one of the reasons I find him fascinating is because he's almost perfectly designed to be the one person who should never be president. He was absolutely obsessed with seeking power, but he hated people, and he was forced to engage with people at a national level, which is why he was so sublime on television. He was one of the first TV operators. The famous Checker speech, which they talk about in the Canadian film, it's the reason that worked was because he didn't have to speak to anyone. He just had to look down the barrel of a camera. He was delighted. He was, but he was so emotionally illiterate. As I said, he had such disdain for the public who voted for him, but he was fueled by resentment and jealousy, even though we got him all the way to the White House. At no point did he ever go oh, do you know what, maybe I've won. It's no, there was always somebody. Here we go. A fascinating, absolutely fascinating man. But the thing is, and he gave Elvis so much time. But actually, definitely in the more recent film, but they do allude to. But at one point, Elvis says, and let me just pull out the quote here, because it's one of those things where if you heard this, you go maybe something's not quite right here. This isn't just a PR opportunity. But I've written it down over here. Sorry, I wrote it down from a different book. Elvis said, "I've been studying communist brainwashing for over 10 years now, and the drug culture too." And that was his way of introduction into this is how I can help you. He was an expert in studying communist brainwashing. In between doing 29 nights in Las Vegas or whatever it was, that one of the films, like, wow, what a legend. You know, oh, God, amazing. It's an amazing story. The picture is incredible. I mean, Elvis looks fucking out of it. He looks so drugged. But then, you know, this is a man who was delivering hand delivering mail at 6:30 in the morning. It's like, you know, I don't think sleep was his friend necessarily, but incredible story.
I just wanted to add, if you the reason I found this Canadian film is that somebody had uploaded it onto YouTube in small segments, but they'd reversed it. To try and beat YouTube's copyright thing.
The algorithm.
But then in the comment underneath, they'd left a link to their Google Drive where you can download it from their Google Drive.
Wow.
Which is remarkably generous.
Yeah,
so if anybody wants it, just go on YouTube, look for Elvis Meets Nixon and download it from their Google Drive.
It's quite good. I didn't think it quite had... It wasn't as well written or as funny as the first 10 minutes, I thought, made it feel like it just didn't quite hold together as quite well. But the Elvis stuff is brilliant. The guy who plays him, whose name I've forgotten, I thought was excellent, just really good. His charisma, like he, you know, the one thing he does better than the Michael Shannon doesn't, is like he turns up at the desk at the airport with no money because he never carries money. He's like the Queen, doesn't carry money. He has people, and he just basically charms his way onto the plane. You know, getting a plane ticket through the staff there, and like, but not in a cynical way. That was the weird thing. Is like, unlike Nixon, like he was completely uncynical.
Yes,
and he was vaguely aware of the power he had in people, but he just kind of lent into it, and it's really quite sweet.
Yes, yeah. And he doesn't look like he's going to tear you limb from limb like Michael Shannon does.
No, that's I wanted. Yeah, you want Shannon to be angry at one point, but this film cruelly denies you that.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's 1970. That's December 1970.
Let's get on with it then. Come on.
When we were in Sweden a few weeks ago, we filmed some intriguing new developments in the study of alcohol.
We have brand new opening credits, Russ. We thought we'd seen them all, and we haven't. Luckily, there's not too much to this. This is very much a kind of a pattern-based opening credits. Same classic theme tune that I know a lot of people see as being the quintessential Tomorrow's World theme tune, age dependent. It's, I don't know, it's really simple, really quick. Actually, the whole show kind of rattles through, doesn't it? Like there's no fat on this. Everyone's kind of quick to move on to the next thing, with the exception of one item that goes on for way too long. Yeah. I think I've described it as a pattern extravaganza. There's no people. There's no objects. There's no sexy woman flipping a coin or anything like that. There's no underwater, submariners. It's just, because it's in black and white, it's just kind of black and white stripes going up and down the screen.
Interesting, Mark, you say that.
I did.
But Tomorrow's World actually started broadcasting in colour earlier this year.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we don't have any.
No, that's true.
Of that.
Very true.
In colour. So that could be those episode titles could be a riot of colour for all we know.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure we could look it up, but we should wait until we come across it organically. And then we will have so much to talk about. But it's just, it was a vertical and horizontal stripes going across the screen. The best bit is the Tomorrow's World logo that we've discussed before, kind of fake animated loads in, like, I don't know, I struggle to describe it. It looks like, it reminded me of the Snake game on old mobile phones, just the way the kind of the lines kind of keep shifting and shaping. So that appears nicely. And then the Tomorrow's World titles are tessellated over and over again, and we zoom out and we see like an infinite number of Tomorrow's World. That happens twice. It doesn't overstay its welcome. The one thing I think that is really interesting was that the theme tune began with what to my ears sounded like the TARDIS arriving. It had a kind of a weird mechanical, which I've not heard before, and we haven't heard in subsequent episodes that we've previously discussed, and that came from nowhere. And so it was all the more interesting that when we cut to Raymond in the studio, and he is in what feels like a kind of a William Hartnell TARDIS set.
Lots of
Very
circles.
Lots of circles, lots of glass, lots of tubes. I had to look up because you may remember when you were different primary kids are taught different things. But I remember there was an art we used to do where you'd get like strips of paper and you'd roll them up into little you'd make them into little tight circles and you'd put them into kind of a little frame and then you'd make pictures, either abstract patterns or you'd try and make flowers or something like that. Now I looked it up and it's called quilling, and that's what the set reminds me of. It's lots of little kind of seemingly little tubes with different kind of diameters, all stacked up. I mean, it looks quite nice. But yeah, it had that kind of William Hartnell Doctor Who thing going on, which, pleasant surprise. But other than that...
They were just saving up all the bog rolls from the television centre toilets to get those cardboard tubes.
When did bog rolls start using cardboard tubes, Russ? If you know the answer, please email tomorrowsworldallthetime@gmail.com.
Yeah, I actually thought that noise sounded more like a jet plane to me. I was wondering whether it's like evoking the modern dynamism of the jet age. But it's a strange thing to add when there's no real sort of visual element to the noise.
No, it would make sense if it was footage of a plane flying or something like that.
Yeah. Or maybe, hang on, maybe there's a previous title sequence that has got an aeroplane on it, and then they just lifted the music from it.
What a tease for the listeners at home! You've got to smash subscribe so that you can listen to us describe that mysterious lost opening credits with the jet plane that may or may not exist.
I was starting to think that maybe we should have just started a podcast that discusses the opening titles.
I'm sure people would be grateful if we could hive that off into a different corner of the internet.
Oh yeah, they don't. I mean, the other thing is this is what we've noticed is in the older Tomorrow's Worlds, they get straight on with the action. Straight on, no messing around. No in this one, Raymond doesn't even let the music finish. He just boom starts, which is worth paying attention to, bearing in mind for when we get to the end of the episode as well, because it's quite a similar ending. But he bookends it well with.
Look, Raymond has been somewhere important, and he has somewhere else to go.
Yeah. Well, I suppose we've got somewhere else to go, haven't we? Shall we? Crack on.
When we were in Sweden a few weeks ago, we filmed some intriguing new developments in the study of alcohol. Well, now that the Christmas party season is well and truly with us, we thought the time might be ripe to show you that report tonight, with 4 days to go. If you're one of those people who think that science and technology are pretty dry subjects, just watch this. Irish beer. And it is too, even though there isn't very much of it. Now this little machine was made more or less as a joke by Professor Brundell, working here at the University of Lund in the complicated field of electromagnetic theory. So, as he says himself, he is not an experimentalist. But what this machine does is to respond to certain human speech characteristics. For instance, I could have said wine. Or alternatively again, I could have said Scotch.
Irish beer. Have you ever heard of Guinness being called Irish beer, Mark?
No,
what do you think would happen if you walked into a pub in Ireland and strolled up to the bar in your best Raymond accent, just went Irish beer, please?
I'll have a pint of Irish beer, please.
It's not even beer. I suppose stout is a type of beer.
Yeah, it is a type of beer.
You never really hear it referred to as that, do you?
No.
Yeah, but I mean there's two.
Would you say it is Guinness? Like it is literally
Guinness. Well, this is the thing.
And it says stout on the bottle.
You could suggest that I don't know whether we couldn't decide whether he's saying Irish beer because this speech recognition machine can only recognise the words Irish beer rather than Guinness, or he's saying Irish beer because this is the BBC and he can't say a brand name. But if you can't say a brand name, then they need to obscure the big Guinness label that's on the bottle of Guinness in the machine that's he's talking into, surely.
What, the massively labelled Guinness bottle next to the massively labelled Johnny Walker bottle.
yeah, exactly.
That the camera zooms in on. Now, it should be said, so to explain, like, he's in Sweden. Clearly, they've done something else. They've been there for a specific reason. And he mentioned this is made as a joke by this Swedish professor. I'm assuming that they had a laugh with this and said, like, you know what, we can record. Let's do something. Let's do something with this mad box of alcoholic tricks. So is it a combination? Is it a combination actually of, like, they didn't want to say Guinness, but that stout sounds too much like Scotch. So he says, so the one thing, when you did your lovely impression there of him saying Irish beer, you missed out he's got this little kind of microphone in his hand with this cable connecting to the box. But in order to operate the microphone or operate the machine, he has to reach out and press a button at the top of the machine right by the bottles, and it makes a huge and satisfying clunk, clunk. And then he starts saying Irish beer, and it's just like, I just wondered, it's like, obviously it's limited technology. Couldn't say stout because it's too much like Scotch. That you could call Johnny Walker, could call it whiskey. You didn't have to call it Scotch. I don't know. It's really weird. And the thing that really, really confused me was that, like, so if you imagine this kind of wonderful wooden box, the Johnny Walker and the white wine, they are upside down, as is the Guinness. They're all upside down so that the necks are pointing down into the box, which is where the pipes are. They are clearly all bottles designed to be sold to pubs. They're because if you look in any
the ones
pub,
you put in optics.
They go into optics. So if you've asked for a gin and tonic and they go up behind the bar and then they push that glass straight up into the bottle, you'll notice that all the labels, you can read them because they're printed on, quote unquote, upside down. That included the Guinness.
Yes.
This Guinness seems to be designed for an optic. I've never heard of such madness. Who goes into a pub and asks for a shot of Guinness? Tepid, warm temperature Guinness? Non-draft, warm temperature, tepid Guinness. Has anyone ever done that? I've never heard of it. Popular in Sweden.
All I'm saying, Mark, is that Raymond is notorious for his tepid booze, isn't he? From previous episodes.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
With his lukewarm cellar. So who knows? Maybe especially brewed for Raymond himself. I don't know.
But they don't explain how this works, by the way. Because it's a joke product. There's no real explanation as to what exactly, what is recognizing the instructions. How does it work? We don't get any of that.
I think it's quite, for 1970, pretty impressive stuff to have some sort of speech recognition.
I thought so too.
But more impressive than other technology they have in the episode that they spend longer on. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I would have quite enjoyed a longer explanation of actually how this box of tricks is going about its business.
Feels like they've accidentally stumbled onto something, but they don't know what they've done.
Yeah. And I couldn't actually find out how it works. I could find the name of the man. I don't know whether he mentions his name. Does he mention his name? Gunnar Fant.
Braun or something like that?
Gunnar Fant, I found. He worked there. He started out working for Ericsson back in the 40s. And he was trying to work out how to improve people's voices down phone lines. So he became very interested in, like, the transmission of synthesized voices along electric lines and things like that. Because he wanted to, like, improve how people could hear each other at the end of the phone. So he started x-raying people's heads and trying to work out how speech was made. And he came up with what he called the source filter model of speech, which has ever since has been sort of like the basis of how people analyse speech. And it's the idea that there's two things that contribute to language, spoken language. And you have a source, which is your vocal cords, in a human anyway, your vocal cords. And then you have a filter, which in human beings is your mouth and your nose. And so, how you form that noise into vowels and consonants and things like that. And the good thing about this theory is that it can be applied to all languages. Like, even if your language is like, I don't know, clicking or whatever like that, it still works within his model. So you can then use that model and apply it stick it in your box of electronics, which I don't know how it works, especially this one, and use that to both decode speech and encode speech. So his actual main interest was synthesizing artificial speech. That's what he worked on the most. I think probably because back then it was more achievable for him to synthesize speech than it was for him to get a machine to understand speech, because computers weren't advanced enough to understand. No. I mean, even now they still, they're getting good, but they're still struggling slightly with understanding what everybody's saying. But yeah, but that's sort of, so he's very much the pioneer of this kind of stuff. And as with all of these things, once the computer was invented, it's just got progressively better and better and better. And now the answer to everything these days is some sort of deep learning or neural network is doing it. I think we had a similar thing, didn't we, in the episode where
Peter McCann went to Tokyo.
McCann in Japan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that was a kind of extension.
And that was about neural networking and
yeah.
Because even then, I mean, that computer only recognized, was it like 8 or 11? Was it 11 words? Because it was pretending to be a doctor. It was like it only reckoned like, unless you had diarrhea or sepsis, like it couldn't help you.
Yeah. The thing that I was what I noticed in this article, which jumped out at me, Mark, is that Oxford University and Google have been developing one that can lip read, and they've already got one that is better than a human at lip reading.
Okay.
Because you know what that made me think of, don't you, Mark? A supercomputer that can lip read.
Oh yeah.
Nothing good can come from that, Mark.
Nothing good did come from that. No.
Old Dave, what's his name?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of it. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say was that the Raymond talking into that little that little device really reminded me of Scotty in Star Trek 4. When he goes into the plant and he tries to talk to the computer, and then the woman holds the mouse up to him and says, "No, use this," and then he speaks into the mouse. "Hello, computer."
Yeah.
It was exactly like that to me, but unfortunately, no transparent aluminium came out of any of Raymond's devices. Oh well, another drink.
Chin chin.
However, if I were to drink all 3 of these, I know pretty much the effect that they would have on me. What we know a great deal less about is the effect that I would have on them.
Alcohol is probably the oldest drug known to man, yet the reaction it triggers in the body is still not properly understood. Recently, however, researchers in Sweden have isolated the enzyme in the liver that breaks down alcohol. Its effect can be observed by placing a test tube of pure alcohol in a fluoroscope, then adding a few milligrams of the enzyme. The enzyme reacts immediately, energetically breaking down the alcohol. In man, the enzyme attacks the alcohol so single-mindedly that the liver's other essential functions are neglected, and this seriously damages the liver. So the researchers are now experimenting with a substance that's capable of neutralizing the reaction. When it's added to the mixture in the fluoroscope, the reaction stops. This research may seem highly theoretical, but it is directly relevant to what is by far the biggest drug addiction problem in the world, alcoholism. The question of whether an uncontrollable and destructive craving for alcohol is caused by psychological problems or by some disorder of the body's chemistry is still being argued, but the researchers believe that the first step towards an effective treatment must be a thorough understanding of the biochemistry of the body's reaction to alcohol. To test this, a rather revolting cocktail of pure alcohol, distilled water, and radioactive carbon-14 is given to a volunteer. The minute quantity of carbon-14 is harmless, but it makes the carbon dioxide he breathes out slightly radioactive. Measuring this radioactivity gives an accurate indication of the rate at which his liver copes with the alcohol. Meanwhile, a solution containing the chemical that inhibits the enzyme's reaction in the liver is prepared for transfusion into the volunteer's bloodstream. To ensure that none of the exhaled carbon dioxide is lost, the volunteer's head is sealed into a Perspex box, which is connected to a kind of super sophisticated breathalyzer.
Oh, cheers, Mark. Cheers to that. Just poured myself another glass of wine while watching those depressed alcoholics.
I did too myself, Russ. I bet you they're well jealous.
Yeah. I think what it is some sort of attempt by Swedish researchers, the Swedes again, to find a pill that people can take that neutralizes alcohol. So I guess does that mean are they trying to so that if an alcoholic drinks loads of booze, they won't get drunk? Is that what it's for, or is it so you can go down the pub, have a load of pints, pop a pill, but then drive home without crashing, or what?
Is such a weirdly framed segment. It is very difficult, I think, to parse exactly what it is, to parse what the conclusion is. I took it that they were. It seems to me that they were trying to find out what it was about alcohol that made it addictive, which is interesting.
Oh, because it's fun.
Lots of things are fun, Russell.
Yeah.
You don't have to rely on a substance to have fun, Russell. Half of it is seemingly about that, but the other half kind of, I don't know. It's just the more I watch, the more confused. Like, the first time round, I thought I understood what it was. I thought I had a handle on it, but the second, third, fourth, fifth time I watched it, it becomes more and more confusing because actually what they're doing is they've invented an enzyme that prevents the liver from processing alcohol. Because at the beginning, Raymond talks about how one of the issues is that when we ingest alcohol, the liver will target alcohol at the expense of everything else, which is very damaging to the liver. So tacitly, what they seem to be implying is that if we can find an enzyme that stops the liver processing alcohol, it's not going to get damaged. There'll be nothing to worry about. What are you complaining about? And
the booze will just flow straight through.
Just flow straight through.
And you'll
magic.
You'll be like Raymond's booze machine, and you'll be able to piss pure Irish beer and drink it again.
As it comes out, comes out your own little optic tube. Which is literally that is how half of it is kind of explained, which is that the real problem with alcohol is that the liver almost sacrifices itself to try and deal with this poison. And so to prove it, they get this poor volunteer. I say poor, like he's smiling all the way throughout. They get this poor volunteer. They feed him a cocktail, the recipe for which I've written down, pure alcohol, distilled water, radioactive carbon-14, one volunteer. They wrap his throat in a towel, a noose-like towel. They then seal his head in a perspex box.
That's my favourite bit.
They literally, like a head sarcophagus. I know.
It looks like that they were just, there's just going to be a crack open a hole in it, just start feeding live rats into it.
It was very 1984. You're not wrong. So the whole experiment is a volunteer drinking a radioactive substance before then being forced to breathe out a radioactive substance whilst they're sealed in a box in order to test a substance that prevents the liver from processing the pure alcohol they've made him drink. And to what end? Like, how's this going to solve anything? I couldn't understand. I just couldn't. I still don't understand what it's about. And then they drop in the segments of, like, the stock footage of one of them might be an actual alcoholic, but generally it's just stock footage of slightly sad middle-aged men.
One of them really does look like a proper alcoholic. The other one looks a bit like he might be an actor, but the little squat fella looks like he definitely likes a drink. But I couldn't work out why it's quite a large perspex box that the head has to go into. Yeah. I didn't understand why they couldn't, because they're breathalyzing him essentially, aren't they, over time?
Well, they say it's like a fancy breathalyzer or something like that, or a really advanced breathalyzer.
Why can't they just get him to breathe into a mask or huff into a tube or why does it need to be such a huge perspex box?
I can only assume that the radioactive carbon dioxide he's breathing out is so dangerous that they don't want to run the risk of themselves having it exposed to them. But it's okay, he can just have it circulating around his head.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed, I don't know if you saw, was there's a bit where just before they're about to do the experiment on him, where the doctor gets a syringe.
Yes.
And he puts it into a glass bottle, which is hanging upside down, which when I first watched that, I assumed was another, like, optic of spirits, like as I'd already watched the previous segment. But I think that's actually just, what's it called? Saline solution or something that they're putting through his bloodstream. But because you always forget that in the olden days, they're actually in glass bottles rather than, the plastic pouches that we have these days. But I don't know.
What is this about?
I can imagine it being framed in later years as they're trying to develop a miracle pill that either prevents alcohol poisoning or sobers people up quickly or one of these sorts of things.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like that they've not even thought that far to the end. They've just decided to start doing experiments.
They genuinely, because of the way this is passed, they genuinely seem to believe that the liver dealing with alcohol is the problem. Your body dealing with this poison that you're chucking in, that's the issue that needs to be sorted. And actually, that was the other thing I was fascinated about, is because like in the episode we watched in 1974, they talk about how no one really understands what the kidneys do. It's a mystery. So it's fascinating that 4 years later, they're kind of saying the same thing about the liver. They don't really understand what the liver does. And I was trying to work out whether... I wasn't trying to work out anything. I was thinking in my head, is this because like it's the most boring bit of the body, so like everyone was dragging their heels and just kind of saying, oh, well we understand everything else. I suppose we better look at this. Or what? I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why this bit of the body was such a mystery.
No. Maybe they were terrified of making some sort of horrible discovery that they'd not conceived of. That might put people off drinking.
Well,
so they couldn't conceive of it. Yeah, it might surprise you, Mark, I couldn't find anything about this research. But interestingly, it's one of those ones. You know, those ones we quite often have where it's a medical one that was years ago, and then I look it up and it turns out that there's a really recent bit of research which essentially appears to be the same bit of research.
Yes, yeah,
and they're talking about it as if it's
new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly that has happened here. So there's some 2018 research by Yunfeng Lu and Cheng Ji from universities in California. And they've been basically doing the same thing, although I presume they're using slightly higher tech lab equipment. But other than that, they've been doing it on mice rather than obliging volunteers. They basically got some mice drunk and then put enzymes in them and saw what effect the enzymes have on them. Interestingly, I found a Daily Mail article. You know how the Daily Mail always sort of takes a scientific paper and then turns it into... And
respects it completely and makes sure that everyone truly understands exactly...
The best bit in this Daily Mail article was they referred to the mice that had been injected with ethanol as party mice. Which made me laugh. But they've managed to develop basically a tablet which has got enzymes in it. So presumably exactly what we thought that this might conclude with, they've managed to actually do. They're still going through tests, but they reckon they wanted to use it to treat proper like alcohol poisoning, to prevent organ damage and things like that. But they have they have admitted that you could possibly use it to, you know, stop yourself either having a hangover or getting as drunk as you if you were somehow if you were a drink, maybe if you were a spy and you had to go to Russia and drink somebody else under the table, you could take it to, you know, counteract the vodka or something. But currently, obviously this isn't available at the moment, but currently, if you are an alcoholic and you go to the doctor and they prescribe something, the main thing that they prescribe is something called disulfiram. And it's purely designed to essentially make drinking such a living hell that you just don't want to touch a drop. So do you want to hear the effects of disulfiram?
Oh, Jesus. Go on then.
Here we go. Disulfiram is used to treat chronic alcoholism. It causes unpleasant effects when even small amounts of alcohol are consumed. These effects include flushing of the face, headache, nausea, vomiting, chest pain, weakness, blurred vision, mental confusion, sweating, choking, breathing difficulty, and anxiety. These effects begin within 10 minutes of alcohol entering the body and last for an hour or more.
Wow, that sounds fun.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I've seen you have hangovers which sound a bit like that. So
I have awful hangovers. Yeah, part of me was thinking like, I recognise all this.
Ticks all the boxes. So yeah, that's something to look forward to, I guess. I don't know.
Yep. Happy Christmas.
Well, now we've had a few drinks, let's go for a drive, shall we?
Figures published yesterday revealed that there were more child road casualties last August than any August since the war. Holiday time is, of course, particularly dangerous on the roads. Now, this time next week, most families will be enjoying their Christmas celebrations. But for some, it will be a time of mourning. And we are all prepared to pay lip service to the problems of road safety. But do we pay sufficient attention to the relevant technology?
Britain has 730 miles of motorway. 70 miles, or just under 1/10, are fitted with central reservation crash barriers. The government has said all the busiest motorways will have barriers installed by this time next year. The type of barrier chosen after road research laboratory tests is the corrugated steel guardrail mounted on steel posts. This best met the vital requirements of a road barrier: to stop the vehicle crossing into the opposite carriageway and to absorb the momentum without catapulting the car back into its own carriageway. Other barriers tested hadn't proved so effective. Continental-style curbs and guardrails too easily turn vehicles over on impact. Wire ropes, favored by the Americans, tended to catch under the bumper. By far the most reliable was the corrugated steel rail. The rail is pre-tensioned and strong. The posts are weak to give under pressure. Now in Yorkshire, a new idea in barriers is being tested for the ministry. 12-foot lengths of shiny polythene tubing are loosely mounted on steel girders 6.5 inches high, very low compared with the 30-inch high conventional steel barrier. But then the principle of this modest-looking invention is entirely new. The idea is to change the vehicle's direction once it's mounted the barrier, and then to let it ride along the rail. The polythene tubing is left free to revolve on its girder, and the test rail is given its final adjustments. Ministry standards are severe. Test runs will build up in weight, speed, and impact angle. First, a lightweight car, 30 miles an hour, 25-degree angle. Slow motion shows the action of the car on a second run. On impact, the offside wheels ride over the slippery rotating tube, and the front offside wheel is twisted to follow the direction of the barrier. The car is now trapped on the rail.
Now, Mark, as somebody who about 20 years ago did my own amateur version of this road crash testing, I would like to suggest to the Ministry of Transport not to use massive oak trees as their crash barriers. Although
It did stop your car.
It did stop my car very, very effectively. Far more effectively, I think, than a 5-inch high bit of plastic pipe next to the side of the road. This is one of those great segments where I feel like we can really lay into it because it's an absolutely appalling invention, isn't it?
It's shockingly bad, especially when it is undercut by the introduction to the segment where they explain how good things are, and then completely undercut by Raymond Baxter's outro at the end. Where like he basically just cuts it over the knees and moves on with the show. This is awful. Because like, yeah, it's just madness. And you know, I'm not a driver, but this wound me up. Something wrong because it's like because the voiceover is so sure that what we're seeing is absolutely the future of affordable road safety. I think that's probably the right way of putting it. Affordable road safety. And yet all the words are undermined by what my eyes are actually watching, which is utter nonsense. Because at the beginning, right at the beginning, it says what we have 700 miles of motorway in 1970, and I'm guessing we have like 4 times as much as that. And it goes to great lengths to talk about the incredible work that the Ministry of Transport has put into trying to make the road safe. And they analysed some of the road safety or the motorway safety measures that they use in the continent, which basically seems to be curbs. And they
it's just smashing into concrete blocks, basically.
Yeah, and they analysed the road safety measures in the United States, where I've certainly seen them, which is the poles with the wires woven through.
Lucky to get even that in America, to be honest. Most of the time
as you rightly point out, yeah.
Yeah, most of the time you can just drive across the central reservation. I mean, this is the basis of much of Smokey and the Bandit, is his ability to just drive across the central reservation and change direction quicker than the police can. Which always I remember watching that even as a child, watching that and going, I'll tell you what, this film will be over in like 10 minutes if they had central reservations in America, like central barriers in them. Anyway, carry on.
No, and then it comes to the conclusion that our approach, which is the very familiar corrugated metal crash barriers that we have in the middle of the central reservoir, that on impact, the vertical struts that hold them up, they are designed to collapse whilst the horizontal corrugated metal is designed to kind of absorb the crash and then redirect the car back into the lane of traffic it came off.
It's just a great design.
And it's brilliant. And throughout that, we are shown some, the classic slow motion, kind of clearly scientifically recorded experiments that show what happened to the cars that hit the continental curbs. They flip over. The cars that hit the American kind of wire and strut system, they flip over. And then the corrugated metal system that we employ, where the car is genuinely redirected back into traffic, and obviously
it's almost like a guiding arm, just guiding the
Yeah,
car
it's like
back
a
into
hug.
the traffic.
That's
Yeah,
what it is.
carry
It's
on
like a
your way.
hug.
It's fine.
Yeah,
We'll clear
mate,
up
you were
after
so
you.
close. But I mean, let's get you home. It's like a paternoster, isn't it? Just you keep going, mate. You keep going. And that's the thing. Like that's over in a minute, and like you're left very very clearly understanding that the system that they are employing at the moment is clearly very safe, and after rigorous testing is safer than anywhere else. Brilliant, perfect. Therefore, all we have to do is roll it out to all motorways, and we'll be laughing, and there'll be less death of children on the roads. Which the more I think about it, it's more like
walking up down the
I was
side
about
of
to
the
say,
motorway.
yeah,
aren't they?
exactly.
On the way, just popping up the M1 on the way to school.
Those bloody primary school trips to the motorway, they need to stop, Russ. Won't anyone learn? So then it goes off to talk about this new development, and like you kind of thinking like, oh, the back of my head, I was thinking like, but those corrugated metal things, like they're still there.
They've literally only just installed them. Like,
yeah,
within the past couple of years,
they're everywhere now. They are.
They've just installed them.
Job's complete.
But yeah. So and they're now suggesting an alternative to something that they've rigorously tested and already installed.
Absolutely. Which, as a viewer watching 52 years later, they're still there because they were. What isn't there, what isn't in the middle or on the edge of our roads, is loose plumbing. These plastic tubes that are, I mean, you said 5 inches off the ground. I think you're being generous. I think they might be 3.5. So what it is like metal poles that are then have free rolling plastic tubes on them.
It's just literally just like bog standard polyurethane pipe, like that you would just lay a drain with or something like that.
Correct. And they kind of are loose, like when you run out of toilet paper and you start kind of pushing the cardboard tubes, so it kind of rattles around there. So that's the system, and the idea is that the out of control car hits the pipe, goes over the pipe, and then miraculously the car is now trapped on this pipe.
As if it's on a monorail or something.
He says exactly correct. That's exactly what I was going to say. He describes it like it's a monorail now, and there's no way this car getting off. And the only way to get it off is to kind of unscrew one of the kind of the underlying metal pipes that the plastic pipe is based around, and then the car can drive off. And we see the experiments that prove that this works. And of course, they show us absolutely not that, 100% not that whatsoever. It is diabolically bad. This is absolutely nonsense.
They're in slow motion for us to really, really watch what that driver is doing.
Yeah, and we did.
And that driver has been paid off by whoever owns the pipe manufacturer, who is bribing the Ministry of Transport and the BBC to do this. This is my big theory, Mark. It's a pipe manufacturing person who is bribing both the Ministry of Transport, that driver, and the BBC to try and promote this new barrier so he can sell more pipes. But that's the only logical explanation, Mark.
He should have paid a bit more to pay off Raymond Baxter, because every time we see the car... Go on.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say exactly the same thing as you.
No,
every time
you're the driver, you tell me.
Every time we see this slow motion driver go across the pipes as if he's about to come off the road,
which again are less than a foot off the ground,
so it's basically like if you ever drove into a town
15, 20 centimeters,
and pulled over on the pavement and went up the curb. I mean, the cars can do that. Don't seem to, you wouldn't want to hit a curb at 70 miles an hour, but you could, it wouldn't stop you flying across the curb if you did hit a curb at 70 miles an hour. This man clearly straightens up the car and steers it as if he is being stopped by the barrier, but he's not. Yeah. He's steering the car with the barrier going underneath the middle of his car, as if he's piloting his own little monorail. But it's the wheels are not being guided by the pipe, because they wouldn't be guided by the pipe, because they just go over the pipe if he just left it to his own
We've seen the
devices.
tyres go over the pipe once. There is literally nothing stopping them going over a second time back onto the road, or indeed to continue over into the other lane, which is the one thing we don't want to happen.
Exactly, straight into that school excursion. It's bizarre because I don't understand how you can present something such clear evidence that what you're saying is utter bollocks.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. And then they do the most stupid thing, which is like, fair enough, you and I have the ability to kind of rewind and look at it over again, which is not not something that was available to the people watching. However, they then repeat the experiment, was it 2 or 3 more times, so that everyone at home can be double and triply sure it's utter bollocks.
Yeah. But they only repeat it with varying sizes of saloon car. They
Going
don't
at
repeat it.
low speed. No.
Yeah, they don't repeat it with a van or a lorry or,
or a car
Land
going at
Rover.
70 miles an hour. Or a car where the driver isn't in it to recheck the steering wheel. Because I said, what if the driver's unconscious? He's not going to be able to turn it back. This makes me angry. At the end of my notes, I wrote down a quote here saying, "Ministry standards are severe." And I was thinking, like, liar. Goddamn liars.
But weirdly, I think because it was so egregiously wrong, I think it might be my favourite part of the episode in its own way.
It was definitely entertaining. Anything you want to say about the cars involved?
Oh, Mark, it's my mission to secretly turn this into a Top Gear podcast without you noticing. One day you'll look up.
So far, I've managed to catch you every time.
One day you'll look up from your laptop and realise we're knee deep in Tiff Needell and Chris Goffey. But I just wanted to point out for car spotters, anybody wanted to know, the first car he uses is a Ford Anglia 105E, which is unfortunately these days known as the Harry Potter car. And the second car, the one that he loads up with 3 tons of, they load up the boot with 3 tons of bricks in order to really test the pipe work. There's a Ford Consul Mark II, which is the car that Eddie Cochran died in a car crash. I don't know whether Eddie Cochran would have been saved if there'd been a load of pipes by the side of the road. I doubt it. But I thought there was a little bit of car facts there. Do you want to know some facts about crash barriers, Mark?
I do, yeah.
Obviously, I can't tell you anything about this crash barrier because it's a load of old nonsense, doesn't exist, and was probably scrapped within minutes of them turning off the cameras. But the crash barrier that we love, the one used in essentially Britain, is known as the Armco crash barrier. I don't know whether it's necessarily the best ever crash barrier, but it certainly has the sort of reputation as the go-to crash barrier. It's like sort of like the Coca-Cola of crash barriers. Now, I always thought it was a British invention because obviously Britain's covered in it and other countries aren't. But actually, it was invented in America. It was invented in 1933 by a company called the Sheffield Steel Corporation of Kansas, which is a bit confusing. I don't know whether do you think there's a Sheffield in Kansas that makes steel?
No, but Sheffield Steel was a famous kind of the guild, so they must have been cooking the same recipe.
But they came up with it, and obviously its beauty is it's very simple, but also very effective. But Armco took over Sheffield Steel very quickly, and they had a massive subsidiary in Britain. The British company was the one that started pumping most of it out. And the first bit laid on a British road was in 1954 on the A3008 at Runnymede near Windsor. It was put near a river to stop cars driving in the river. But so the Armco said, look, this is really good. So they went to the Ministry of Transport and said, do you know you've just built the M1? Do you want to put a load of Armco up the side of it so people don't crash their cars? And the Ministry of Transport said, oh, no, it's fine. The motorways are perfectly safe. We don't need any crash barriers on the side of that. It's all been designed absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. Which was the case for much of the 60s, which is probably why there's all of these accident statistics that Raymond starts the whole thing with. And actually, I think there's a slightly misleading bit in the tape where the voiceover man, whose name I've forgotten now,
Derek Cooper?
Derek, yes, he says that there was a lot of accidents involving cars going across the Central Reservation.
Yes,
but that's because those statistics come from before when they put the Armco barriers in the Central Reservation. So he's not comparing. Like with like, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So the reason why Armco became sort of the go-to thing was that in 1966, Jackie Stewart, the Formula One driver, he had a terrible crash at the Spa track in Belgium. And after he had that crash, where he flew off the track, but he was really hurt by it, and he started a massive safety campaign in Formula One, and they looked for what were the best crash barriers to put round Grand Prix tracks, and it was Armco. So they started putting it around all the Grand Prix tracks, and Armco became this household name in Europe.
Yeah,
almost.
I'd say, once you said Armco, I thought of Formula One.
And people like Jackie Stewart were talking about it on TV. And the weird thing is that the American parent company had no idea. They were just calling it a crash barrier. And it was only when one of the American executives happened to be watching TV when he was in Europe, and everybody was going Armco, that he realised that the company he was working for was like a household name in Europe.
Yeah.
But anyway, so basically, the fact that it was used in Formula One popularised it, and from that, the Ministry of Transport decided to adopt it, and that's why it's on all of our roads now. But they use it in other European countries and some places in the US, but it's not really as ubiquitous as in the UK. So, I mean, I've driven to quite a few countries, and some of the stuff that some European, I think France is mostly just concrete, and it's absolutely terrifying doing 70 and 80 miles an hour right next to a concrete wall. Whereas I always feel like if I'm driving alongside some Armco, it could be fine. Even if I do crash into it, it'll be all right in the end. Although the one thing I do want to hit, I don't ever see it in America. They quite often have junctions off of the freeway, and where the junction splits, they put massive tanks of water.
Barrels. Yeah,
water barrels. Yeah. Absolutely love to
Water
plough into
butts.
one of them at one point. That's got to be great fun, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sure we can make that happen, Russ.
Oh yeah, and one last thing, Mark. If you wanted to buy yourself some Armco,
Yes.
they do sell it. They sell it in lots of places, but the cheapest I found, if you go to jamessmithfencing.co.uk, you can get 3.5 metres of it for £27 delivered.
But not installed.
No, not installed. No. Well, it's yours to do what you want with it, Mark.
Did you say £27?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, well, think the things you could do with it. You pop it out in your front pathway.
I would never feel...
Stop the neighbours crashing into your front door.
I was about to say, I'd never feel more safe in my back patio than... I'm always fearing head-on collisions. And then the other thing we should... Well, there might be more we're going to discuss, but we should mention Raymond Baxter's outro.
Oh, yes.
Which we have already.
Yeah.
You might as well play it, but just
I
because
will.
he completely undercuts the entire segment we just undermined in, a second and a half?
I'd like to see that at 70 miles an hour, 12 ton up. Anyway,
it's perfect. He can see.
Yeah, he's laughing on the inside.
Raymond is an experienced motor racer. Let us not forget.
Yes.
So he knows a load of old junk when he sees it.
Yeah. Because as you rightly pointed out, my list of questions is what about a van? What about a truck? What about an unconscious driver? And then you just said what about bloody Range Rover? Just you don't need any of that. It's just a slightly larger tire. It's boom, dead.
Imagine if they had just covered all the roads in that and then not changed it. And these days there was just SUVs ploughing into each other left, right, and centre across the country.
Head-on collisions at 140 miles per hour. I can't believe this piping didn't stop it.
But and Britain's richest man was a pipe baron. Sitting on a throne of skulls. Right, shall we
We should.
Move on to another slightly useless invention.
here's James Burke.
Today, thousands of children all over the country have been breaking up for the Christmas holidays. Lucky things. And primary school children will be showing loads of handiwork, pictures and exercise books to admiring parents. But very often it's the arithmetic book that isn't presented with quite so much pride. It is true that the third of the 3 R's is often the hardest to grasp, certainly for slower learning children. Mathematical apparatus in primary schools tends to follow a rather traditional path. This abacus here, for instance, makes use of a counting system that was devised by the ancient Egyptians centuries ago and is still in wide use today. Now, as an extension of counting on the fingers, it's all right. But its chief limitation for children is that these beads don't immediately represent numbers, they only represent beads. And then there are the techniques which try to show the composition of numbers by physical size. Now, if this coloured block here is worth 10 units, then it takes 2 units worth 5 each to make up the same size. Now, the calculation there can be seen to be correct, but for larger numbers you're going to need vast quantities of pieces and a huge table. The basic problem is not getting a child to add or subtract, because that can sometimes be learnt parrot fashion anyway. It's getting the child to understand how numbers are built up and why you carry over from the unit column to the tens column, for instance. Now, this box goes some way to solving the problem. A simple telephone-type dial, 3 glass tubes with a light point in each, one for units, one for tens, and one for hundreds. A selector switch over here for addition or subtraction, and another here for the units tube, the tens tube, or the hundreds tube. Now, let's suppose I want to add 64 to 257. Now, I dial the units up first, 4 of them, 64. I select the tens tube and dial the 66. There we are. Now I have 64 registered. Now I go back to the units, dial up the 7 of 257, then to the tens, dial up the 50, then to the hundreds, and dial up the 200. And I can read off my addition now, 321. 3, 2, 1. Now, suppose I want to subtract from 321, 64. All I do now is switch the subtraction addition things to subtraction, go back to units, dial up 4, and the light goes anti-clockwise this time, then over to the tens and dial up the 6. And we end up with the number we first thought of, 257.
Raymond sums it up as marvellous there, Mark. Is it marvellous? It occurred to me that this is the second in this episode, the second box of mechanical tricks created by one man that seemingly has no real commercial use. It's just been done as almost like a personal project. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the first one being that the voice controlled booze operator, and this one being some booze operator, unbelievably complex adding machine that is apparently meant to teach children the simplicity of maths. It's an incredible own goal. I
think one of the best things you've done with editing these episodes over the episodes is you don't play entire segments. You just give enough for a flavour, and then hopefully we explain it. I almost think, fuck the listener, play the whole thing. If we're gonna suffer, they should too. Yeah. It is interminable. Don't do that though.
No, but the thing is, the best bit comes kind of towards the end when he gets really stuck in the weeds.
He really does, yeah.
Because this machine has no reset button on it.
Well, then play this bit now.
Now, if I bring it back to 0, we can show you a quick attempt at it with children. Says he, making it difficult for himself as an adult. Put things back to the plus and 0 it like this. There's 7 on there. Plus 3 makes 10. Comes up to 6 here, add 4, 10, comes up to 3 on the hundreds, add 7, and we've got all the zeros. Now we have a couple of children, both 8-year-old, there's Karen and Richard, and we're going to see just how easy it is for them to work this machine. Okay, Karen, you give Richard a problem.
It has no reset button.
So once he's done his maths, he then has to do supplementary maths in order to return all the counters to 0.
Yeah, absolutely.
For it to be used again.
Yeah, he has to do maths to undo the maths. And the thing is, I told you, it really, that bit specifically really reminded me of the legendary segment from the Day-to-Day where Alan Partridge explains how the US 94 World Cup is going to work. And he has this kind of polystyrene football, hemispherical football, and this stick putting out. He's got all the venues, and then on the bird's eye camera, you can see kind of this rainbow of group games, and it's deliberately designed to be completely confusing. And obviously, the joy is him beginning to realize he doesn't understand how it works, and is trying to kind of reset it. And then if he just kind of flails, goes, and in the end, the final will happen. And that is kind of where James Burke kind of gets to when he's trying to reset it. It's obviously it's a much simpler thing to do, but him operating it reveals how difficult and challenging this device is to explain. What does he say? He describes it as simple and effective, and it is remarkably difficult and certainly completely unsimple.
And then it's doubly proved by the fact that he then, after he's really complicatedly reset it, brings in some children to operate it, which is this has been designed by a schoolmaster from Hastings.
We'll talk about
for
Hastings,
the use of his
you and I.
children.
Yeah. Yes.
Some children come in to use it, and then
Sweet
the
kids,
kid,
yeah.
then the kid can't use it without Burke telling him how to use it.
Absolutely, yeah. Burke gets close to sounding like he's losing his patience, and he isn't. He's not.
No.
It's just they're struggling to use this thing. It is very unuser friendly. Actually, the bit I really loved is when he goes like, "Oh, and look, and here's something that can be attached on top of it to make it, so that it's pounds and pence." Didn't make it any simpler. It's just like, and has this kind of awkward wheel in the end for the halfpenny.
Yeah, actually, just thinking about it, that pounds, because the whole point of that is obviously decimalisation is a year away or whatever.
Yeah.
So presumably they were
teaching.
teaching kids decimal currency at this point in schools. So I can understand the idea of adding that decimal addition to the machine. But there's just occurred to me that machine works on decimal anyway.
Yes, no, he hasn't done anything.
The whole point of decimalisation is it's the same system.
Yeah,
as
base 10 or whatever. Like you don't. It's literally just a couple of labels. Like he doesn't have to do anything. And I was just thinking, like, what would a similar device be like that was for imperial coins? It'd be some fucking Heath Robinson-esque contraption that serves you a boiled egg halfway through. So I thank God I never learned it. I didn't know how many pence in a shilling or whatever.
No.
But how many wheels? It would have been like Babbage's machine in the foyer in the Science Museum.
I couldn't work out as well. Like, obviously it uses a phone dial on the front.
Yes.
Which is a very satisfying thing to use.
Yes, very, very satisfying, yeah.
But I couldn't work out whether that is because it somehow works using the same system as a phone, or is it just because a phone dial is a very familiar thing for entering numbers? They wouldn't have a keypad on a calculator yet, or any sort of adding machine or anything. Nobody would be familiar with that at the moment, would they? So like a dial on a phone would probably be the most familiar way of entering numbers into something.
But also, like, it probably would have been what was to hand.
Yes, yeah.
All you had to do was take part a phone. He had one in his house. They're 10 a pen. Then again, is this around the time when, like, you hear these horror stories of, like, if you wanted another phone, like it was like a 12-week waiting list at the GPO or something like that. I don't know. Things just didn't work then. But like you could have found a phone, and he was just using what was to hand, because it cost him £12, which I'm assuming is more money than I think. But it also sounds.
Shall I get the old inflation calculator out?
Yeah, you can add out the length of time it takes to load up the screen.
I quite like it when you hear the typing sound effects on the.
Go for it then.
I was just going to say that I think around this era, my dad was working for the GPO as a phone engineer.
And no wonder it took.
So it definitely would have taken many weeks to get a phone installed.
You're lucky
because he was spent every day in the pub.
Yeah. And then he would return home to a house full of phones. Hello, Roy.
£12. £12 in 1970 is worth £197.79 today.
Yeah. Okay. So it's slightly more expensive. That's real money.
That's loads.
That's a lot. But it does look good. It looks like a man made it, but it looks like he spent time. Like it's well made.
It has a nameplate on it, I noticed. I don't really notice it.
I didn't. What does it say?
It had a nameplate in the bottom right of it. It said it was called the Hastings Junior Calculator.
Oh, that's quite nice.
Which I obviously immediately Googled.
Of course you did. And?
0 hits on
Zero
Google.
hits.
Absolutely 0. Presumably, maybe you could find out all about it on the version of the internet that is powered by rotary telephones.
Yeah.
It's all over that. But yeah, on modern internet, disappeared into the ether. But what I did think was obviously made this piece worthwhile, certainly for us, is that it is our introduction to the mighty James Burke.
Welcome, James Burke.
Yeah, it's taken, far too many episodes for us to find him. Unfortunately, presented in an era where not many of them are around anymore. And I have to say, quite ashamedly, I didn't know really anything about James Burke before this. But I immediately warmed to the man, and
Same.
I could see. I remember a couple of weeks ago, Gaz Top said that his two favourite TV presenters were William Willard and James Burke. And I can see why. Top's right. Burke is an absolute... He's superb. He's an amazing presenter. I can't say enough good things about the man. He just came across so well immediately, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing more of him in the future.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see more. I think we both had the same instant reaction when he came on the screen, which is like he was just so warm and convivial, clearly knowledgeable, very professional, very relaxed. which is not true of a lot of presenters at this time, or a lot of television at this time. And I always think how a presenter, famously, don't go on TV with children and animals. He does. Like, there's two kids there, and his warmth and patience with them, it comes across. It doesn't seem artificial, and that is to my mind, that is such a telling thing that those kids are having fun with him.
Yeah. He says a little joke there, and a little girl
and she laughs.
Giggles at it. Yeah.
The suspense is killing me.
Puts them at their ease.
Yeah, they're really comfortable. He's going to give them as long as it takes to do what they need to do, that they've all agreed they're going to do. Yeah, the object itself is worthy of our derision, but the presentation was really lovely.
Yeah.
It was nice. I really enjoyed watching it, and I enjoyed watching him. And he comes back later, and he's just like, I don't know when he comes into this. I'm sure you'll tell me in a second, but I have a sneaky suspicion that it's James Burke arriving to Tomorrow's World that separates the kind of the patrician-y delivered program that it starts off with under Raymond Burke in 65,
Baxter.
And connects it to the Willy Woolard onwards, the program that we know and love. In many ways, people talk about Raymond Burke. I've got a sneaky suspicion
Raymond
based
Baxter.
on Raymond Baxter. Sorry,
Is
Raymond
it
Baxter.
Is it Raymond Ironside?
Oh, that sounds right, doesn't it? Yeah. Don't write it incorrectly. Based on just this one episode, and you sent me a clip, you sent me a link to the first episode of Connections, which I'm sure you'll also talk about. I wonder if actually Tomorrow's World is around and talked about because of James Burke and not Raymond Baxter.
Yeah,
that it's him who brings it into the 70s. And
yeah,
then
it does. I'm having gone dug deep into the Burke hole.
Tell us all about it.
Yeah.
You rummaged around. What have you found?
The Burkenator, as I've decided to start calling him.
You have.
He was born 22nd of December, so his birthday's on Tuesday. 22nd of December, 1936. So he's still alive. He's 85 now.
How's it going? Brilliant.
But in this episode, he's 4 days away from his 34th birthday.
Oh my God.
But he's born in Derry, Northern Ireland. However, he was educated, Mark, at Maidstone Grammar School.
Wow.
So he has the closest education to us so far, I think.
That is absolutely
just
true.
down the road. Yeah. So then he did national service in the RAF. So I think he's our third pilot. Well, I don't know whether he was a pilot. It's just that he was in the RAF.
He was in the RAF.
But,
okay, yeah.
But that means Baxter, Woolard, and Burke, all RAF people. And then obviously went to Oxford, as a lot of these people do. But he studied Middle English. Got an MA in Middle English, which I guess is that Chaucer, Middle English? It is, isn't it?
That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, so then he became, in the early 60s, he became like a lecturer, and he went to taught in Italy, at British universities and schools in Italy. And then his sort of, is it Damocles moment? What's that? Like a moment
Damocles,
where he's...
yeah.
Damocles.
Sword of Damocles.
No, that's the wrong word. No, road to
Oh,
Damascus.
Yeah.
What is it?
The
I
fork
don't
in the
know.
road,
There's
yeah,
a like when somebody has like a fork in their road
Yeah.
of life, whatever. Sliding doors moment. Is,
Yeah, let's really talk in a way that people understand. Yeah.
yeah. He was on a bus in Rome, and there was an advert. I don't know whether the advert was on the side of the bus or whether he was reading a newspaper or whatever. It didn't say. But anyway, there was this advert, and the advert was from Granada Television in Britain, and they were looking for local reporters in Italy. Obviously, who could speak English, I guess, was the idea. So he decided to himself, he says, I decided if the bus stopped at the next corner, I would get off and apply for the job. And it did. So he did. And the next thing he knew, he went straight to Sicily to do a film about the mafia. Like a report.
Fun.
Yeah.
Feels like a hospital pass, doesn't it?
But so then, obviously, that was in some way successful because he immediately moved back to London. 1966, moved back to London, started working for the BBC at their science and features department, and hosted a few different programmes, and then got the Tomorrow's World gig, I think around, I couldn't find a confirmed date. It's either 66 or 67.
Early.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
He was like the proto Woolard McCann in that if they had a episode where somebody had to go a long way away, he would be like, there's a few specials where he's like in Alaska or places like that, which hopefully we'll come across at some point in the future.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, difficult to find stuff. down
But
there.
what brought him to the nation's attention mostly is that he was the chief reporter for the Apollo missions for the BBC, and on the night of the moon landing, it was him, Cliff Mitchell-Moore, and Patrick Moore in the studio presenting the moon landing. And he filmed over 10 days, over the 10 days of the Apollo 11 mission. They filmed 27 hours of coverage, and James Burke was involved in most of it. And you know how much of it the BBC kept?
Oh, stop. Zero? Any
a
of
minute.
it?
About a
1
minute.
minute. Well, just the landing. Is that it?
No. Like, obviously, that
of the
footage was
studio
coming
stuff.
from America. Of the BBC based stuff.
The stuff that people actually would remember and kind of
The stuff
feel
that people
warmth
would watch.
towards.
So like
the stuff
like
you might buy a
Mitchell
box set
Moore
of.
and him in the studio.
Oh, stop. A minute.
Yeah, a minute, right?
sakes.
So you can. I could possibly drop in. It's quite a good little bit of reporting, and he's doing a great job.
You do.
At this moment, Apollo 11 is nearly 35,000 miles out from Earth and heading for the moon at 7,000 miles an hour. Everything about the mission has gone so perfectly that a mid-course correction due early tomorrow morning won't now be necessary. There have been 2 small errors. They did use a fraction too much fuel in a manoeuvre just after they left Earth orbit, and the second error was gratifyingly the computer's fault. We now learn that launch this afternoon was 724 milliseconds late. Tomorrow they have a fairly relaxing day ahead of them, with plenty of time to wonder if the Russian Luna 15 has pipped them at the post. Gerald Bankov said that Luna's on a course different from any other Russian moon probe, and one that could well take it to a lunar landing. If it's going to scoop up moon rock, it should be getting down to the digging on the surface sometime tomorrow morning. No mention of all this in conversations between Mission Control at Houston and the Apollo crew. No mention of much other than the barest technical details. Although perhaps the crew are going to be a little bit less cold than we thought they were going to be. Just now, Mission Control asked them why the long period of radio silence, and they answered that wasn't radio silence. That was a sandwich in my mouth.
No one knows where the tapes went, but it seems like they were probably, in BBC style, just either wiped or binned. Now, I think this is. I always agree. Like, I know a lot of people get upset about them wiping Doctor Who, but I can kind of understand something like that. Or, I mean, we could get annoyed about them wiping old episodes of Tomorrow's World. Or
Yeah,
Swap Shop
I'm
or
sure we
whatever.
will. Yeah.
But how anybody could walk into the archive and go, yeah, we can easily record over these videos of the moon landing, like, it's insane. So the one theory I came up with, I hope beyond hopes, is actually somebody just went down there and nicked them, and they're in somebody's garage somewhere. That's that's the only thing we can hope, really, isn't it, Mark?
Aren't these things normally found like in a skip in the middle of like the Congo, the DRC or something like that? For some reason, they're always in Africa, former colony, and fingers crossed. Yeah, I mean, you have to hope. I mean, if they do find,
Yeah.
I mean, like the sad thing is, I mean, I suppose the reason people talk about Doctor Who is that there's such a passionate fan base that people go out to hunt down old episodes. I don't think the moon landings is quite the same kind of. That's a shame. That makes me really. That doesn't make me angry. It makes me sad that. There was no
Well,
real...
you know what it made me think of? It made me think of, when the Taliban started blowing up all those ancient monuments.
Yeah.
It's like that.
It's cultural destruction, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, that's what people remember gathering round. I remember my mum told me, like her dad, because I think the landing was at like 2 a.m. or something, UK time, obviously, in Ireland. And like her dad woke her up and brought her down to sit and watch, I assume, the BBC version. And that's what people were crowded around. That's your shared memory. It's everything around the event as much as anything else. It's like to have the lack of imagination that somehow destroying that would have no price. I don't know. That's what makes me sad. It's like just
Yeah.
But I appreciate tape back then was incredibly expensive, and
Yeah, but that's like, I don't know, that's like saying gold's expensive, let's melt down the crown jewels. It's like...
yeah, I suppose. Yeah, why not?
So
Actually,
some things
these are
are
27
beyond
hours you actually
value.
genuinely can put in on the shelf up there with the coronation. Like, you're not gonna, no one needs a recording of the first episode of Pebble Mill. Don't touch the coronation footage.
Yeah. And it's noticeable that the BBC didn't record over the coronation tapes, did they?
No, they did not, Russell. That's what I mean. There must be a shelf somewhere where that was untouched, and yet this didn't make the cut.
Double
What
standards.
did? Double standards. Yeah.
Anyway,
Burke.
yeah, but they should
The
have sent the Queen to
Burkemeister.
the moon. Burke.
Burkeneater.
Burkenator, he then only presented Tomorrow's World until 1971, so he made a big impact in quite a short space of time, comparatively short space of time compared to a lot of the presenters. But he then got a program called The Burke Special. Again, another thing that there's not really much exists of it, but it was produced by Michael Blackstad, the Tomorrow's World guy, and it was kind of like Kilroy in that Burke was in the middle of a sort of a circus of studio audience. But rather than it, be the sort of things that Kilroy would talk about, they were talking about the future and technology and great debates of human existence. So
you've reminded me, Russ. No one really talks about the Veritas political party these days, do they?
They don't. No.
I go on eBay and see how much merch there is.
Oh yeah, you can put it up. You put it up with your Nixon stuff.
My Nixon stuff, yeah.
You got your Nixon stuff, and then you got your really niche Veritas.
I know.
Under the counter specialist
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah. Only comes out in a brown bag every now and then for people in the know.
But then Burke's going well, and then in 1978, this is the thing that really made him. He made this seminal documentary series called Connections, which was huge. It did really well, and it was made by the BBC, but also broadcast on PBS in America, and it became up to that point the highest rated show ever on PBS. So loads of people watched it. What I thought was interesting is that obviously all of the great documentary series of the 1970s are single words beginning with C. So you've got Civilizations, Connections, and Cosmos. Do you think that's a coincidence there, Mark?
I think that's a coincidence. I do, Russ, yes. Unless you know something else.
Anyway, so this series, I've started watching this now. It's all on YouTube. You can watch it, and it's brilliant. I love it. I love these sort of 1970s I love Cosmos, and I love this because the documentary it's really engaging. It's quite fast moving. And there's no bollocks in it. James Burke doesn't go and stand on a mountain while a drone circles him for 10 minutes. And he doesn't, drive through America in a pickup truck and stop at a diner and then explain how the planets work by using salt and pepper shakers.
Nor does he tell us he's going to take us on a journey.
Yes, no, exactly, yeah. And he never recaps anything every 10 minutes. It's all, he takes something and he shows you how one thing's connected to the other and then comes to the conclusion at the end. It's an absolute masterclass in documentary making. I think if anybody, wants a flavour of it, then the best thing they can do is to go on YouTube and just search for what somebody's titled as the greatest shot in television. And it's taken from one of the Connections programmes, and it's quite an amazing thing. He's striding along, almost Alan Wicker style, striding along talking to the camera. And he's at Cape Canaveral, and he's describing how the invention of the rocket and how
the first thing is it's a dolly shot, and he's walking along that Saturn V that's on its side at Cape Canaveral. Anyone can walk along. That's like half a kilometre long or whatever. And he's talking, and then it cuts to what is the greatest show.
You see, all three men had understood that certain gases ignite, and that the thermos flask permits you to store vast quantities of those gases safely in the frozen liquid form until you want to ignite them, at which point you take the top off the flask, the gases evaporate, you apply a light, and boom. Now, two gases do that better than any other, and it was Obert's assistant who put them together most efficiently. His name was Werner von Braun, and the two gases that he released from his particular version of a thermos flask, the one lying on its side behind me now, were hydrogen and oxygen. If you release those two gases into a confined space with a hole at the other end of it and mix them as you do so, and then set light to them, you get that. Destination, the moon or Moscow. The planets or Peking.
In the 1970s, rockets being launched was not like a everyday occurrence. It's not like Elon Musk these days. He launches one every other Friday. So what they must have done is they must have gone, right, there's going to be a rocket launching and we're going to use this in our shot. And James Burke speaks and he introduces his piece and then he points at the rocket in the background. And as he points at the rocket in the background, with exact timing, the rocket launches to demonstrate his points about all of the preamble about how rockets work. And if he'd fluffed that up in any way, that shot would not be able to be used. It is an audacious piece of documentary making, and I could watch it over and over and over again. I
televisual braggadocio. It's absolutely tremendous, isn't it? Like it's one of those things where like I've seen it a few times over the years, and you're like, oh, it's really, really impressive. It was only recently that I put two and two together and realised it was James Burke, and we'd get to him in Tomorrow's World and stuff like that. But actually, you sent me the link to the first episode of Connections, which again was a bit like, Cosmos and Civilization, I swear, have been on TV. Certainly Civilization, I'm relatively certain was on BBC 4 during the first or second lockdown. Like it was on, recently. Yeah. Cosmos, I think, has done the rounds as well, but Connections hadn't. So I was so less familiar with it. And you, when you sent me the link, you said he really reminded you of Adam Curtis, who is someone we're both very fond of. And I absolutely got what you were doing. And actually that first episode, it's mostly about one power cut that specifically hit New York, but actually hit most of the states around it. And it was one night in 1965. And from that, he extrapolates out how we're basically we have built traps for ourselves, and that we basically, none of us are ever going to survive ever again outside our technological kind of, we live in these incredible spaces, but it has basically removed our ability to survive. Because he goes on, then he basically says, like, well, what if it never came back? What happens then? And he takes you on a journey, Russ. And basically he goes, okay, so you leave the city, you end up in a farm. Now what are you going to do? Farms are modern now. They need electricity, power, stuff. So that's all out. Can you kill and butcher an animal effectively? Great, brilliant. You're next. But then, what about the next generation of animals? And then, how are you gonna play the field? Because it's really incredibly well done. And because one thing I'm always really interested in is those little small moments where, from a small thing, huge events. The way we're living now happens through a sequence of small little developments, and to go back and to understand how they all start is absolutely fascinating. And it was incredibly well done, and I plan to now watch the entire series, because in a way what I thought was most interesting about it was that although obviously it's from 1978, you were saying, so there's an element of it where it's dated. There's a whole sequence where everyone is trapped on a subway train on the New York Metro, and it's about how we would all get on, really. There's a woman who has a birthday, and she also happens to have brought candles, so they're down there for like an hour and a half, and someone has a cake, and they eat the cake, and they pass around wine. And it was interesting because I think, like, now of course everyone have mobile phones, so what would happen. Things are different, but fundamentally when he's looking at history in such a wide spectrum, the difference between the documentary he filmed in 1978 and where we are now is not that huge. So I'm assuming that quite a lot of what he has to say is still accurate and germane to us now. It's not like you need to do Connections 2. Yeah.
Well, he did, though. He did Connections 2 and 3.
Did he?
Yeah.
I wish he called it Connections. And then what? Connections versus Predator?
I think he called them Connections Squared and Connections Cubed, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming rather than moving things on, like he's developing that idea and just talking about different things.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. He's just continued to do all this. He's still doing it now. Like he's working on a fourth Connections, apparently.
Right now, incredible.
This was last in 2020. He was last asked about it. He's saying he's working on another book and TV series about it. So I look forward to that.
Yeah.
He also in 2015 on the 50th anniversary of Tomorrow's World, he presented an hour-long Radio 4 documentary looking back at Tomorrow's World. So he's beaten us by
his tanks on our
6 or 7 years. So,
wow.
He's very his own audit.
He's way ahead. Isn't he? He's way ahead of us.
You can still listen to it on the BBC website. I've not got round to doing it yet, but I'll be interested to listen to that. What's great about him is his understanding of everything is so great that not only is he able to explain the past, but he's able to predict the future, sort of thing. So there's apparently there's a couple of his predictions. Where is it? So yeah, in an article for the Radio Times in 1973, Burke predicted the widespread use of computers for business decisions, the creation of huge banks of personal information, and changes in human behaviour, such as a greater willingness to reveal personal information to strangers. Does that sound like Mark? Huh?
That's creepy, isn't it?
Yeah. He also later suggested that computing and communications might be controlled by an elite group of computer scientists. Also, also predicted that a worldwide revolution in communications and computer technology would allow people to instantaneously exchange ideas and opinions. Mark. Does that sound like? Sounds a bit like Twitter, doesn't it? But although I bet he's probably slightly depressed by how that did turn out. I'm sure in his mind it was probably
less dystopic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also, surely the largest head of any Tomorrow's World presenter.
Yeah,
we
do have to touch upon this. Only because if I reach out my hands, I'm likely to touch him because it's that big. It is huge, and it is bigger in connections. It actually genuinely looks like he has shoved more knowledge into his head in the 8 years since this episode. It is astonishing.
He's overstuffed the brain suitcase, hasn't he? With stuff.
Yeah, the brain trunk.
And I don't know whether because he's got that fascinating hairline, which I can't. It's not quite comb over, is it? Because
there's hair there.
There's hair there, and it kind of, if you see even photos of him in the 1990s, it's still the same haircut. I don't know what you would call that. It's kind of that a full halo of hair, but he still kind of. Is it just because the size of his head is just pushed through his hairline? Is that what's going on there?
Are you in your head? Is his hair like underneath his skull, and it's just like a full normal hair, and all just what's left? What? It's only the stuff that has managed to escape. Through. Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. I like that. That's lovely.
Visible from space.
Marvellous. There are more maps and guidebooks being sold today than ever before. Everyone seems to want to know where they're going, but they may be very surprised when they get there. Modern developments are happening so fast that quite often even the newest maps contain inaccuracies. You may plan a trip to the country, only to find when you get there that it's a new town. But, in fact, thanks to advanced technology, there could be hope yet.
Nowadays, nearly all original surveys and map correction are based on aerial photographs. There are two big aerial survey companies in Great Britain, and the techniques they have developed are among the finest in the world. Together they have over a dozen aircraft constantly engaged on survey flights all over the world. The cameras they use are manufactured to very fine tolerances because any map based on a photograph can only be as accurate as the original negative itself. The camera operator is always in close contact with the pilot. It's very much a team operation. The pilot must keep the position and height of the aircraft accurate to within a few yards. Automatic controls are not exact enough. Adjustments are constantly being made by hand. It's precision flying. The height and speed at which the aircraft flies will depend on the scale needed on the finished map. The nearer the aircraft is to the ground, the more the detail will show up. But no matter how accurately the pilot flies, nor how much detail is shown, the photograph itself can never be used as a large-scale map because it will be distorted by perspective. But this machine will scan an aerial photograph and convert it into a new picture, a picture free of any distortion by perspective that can be used as the most accurate, up-to-date map in the world. A map that can be produced within a few hours. Photographs are processed and printed within minutes of being landed. Vital work may be held up until the details shown on pictures like this one have been carefully studied. Speed is essential. But the photograph must be corrected for perspective. The ground in this river valley is taking up less space on the photograph than the high ground on either side of it, because when the photograph was taken, the high ground was nearer to the camera, and therefore it appears bigger. It's the same with any photograph. The nearer an object is to the camera, the bigger it is in the final picture. This type of distortion is used all the time in advertisements. The glass always seems much bigger than the person. But this machine will remove the distortion.
Still awake, Mark?
I mistakenly earlier suggested that to punish our listeners who frankly have suffered enough, that you should play the entire clip about the motorway safety. He's like, no, this is the one you should play. This is the one that's interminable. This goes on for so goddamn long.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, I didn't actually time it, but it feels like about a third of the program. I think it seems like about a third of the program this goes on for, and it's not. I don't think anybody would be impressed by the outcome really, because it's everyone's aware of aerial photography. We all know they must have been using it in the Second World War. So slightly improved aerial photography. Does it really require a solid 15 minutes of slow explanation?
Very dry, slow, laboured explanation. No, I don't believe it does. And yet, that's what we're gifted.
I did notice that. I can't believe this is the first time I've noticed it, and then when I thought about it, I thought, oh no, this always happens. When Raymond introduces something, he always says that the most of something is going on now. So in this, he opens this with something like the most maps and guidebooks are being made ever, or something like that, as some sort of way of introducing the item. But it's not. They're not making maps, are they?
No, they're not.
It's aerial photography. What it seems to me is that they're not saying it, but it's essentially it's much more useful for spies than it is for ramblers or the council or things like that. It's for people who need to know exactly what's on the ground at that moment. It's like people who are perhaps watching troop movements or trying to find aircraft bases or things like that. Surely that's what this technology is for, rather than the ordnance survey. No?
No. I was just no. I completely agree. Obviously, the one thing this isn't is they're not making maps, and the whole thing is like, people are using maps more than ever because they want to know where they're going. Which is like perfect. It's like we're not seeing anything like that because like. So the idea of this is that in order to make really accurate maps, you have to account for. They kept on saying perspective. You have to account for perspective. The idea that the top of a mountain is closer to the camera than the bottom of a valley. And so therefore, the map you make in the photo is inaccurate because everything's out of scale. And it kind of dawned on me, it's like, well, it didn't dawn on me, it's more like, who cares? I mean, is the difference so vast that, you're going to take the wrong turn left? You're going to take the second left into the third left because the perspective of the hill next to the road has warped? No, not at all. A map is a 2D representation of a 3D space. You don't actually have to account for every single element of the real world. You just need to be able to explain to people in a really legible and understandable way where they are in conjunction or in the context of everything else, so that they can then plan where they are going to go. That's it. No one needs to have such an accurate representation of the United Kingdom when they are going to an Airbnb in the coast, which leads everyone to believe exactly what you're saying, which is that this is clearly spycraft. And it reminded me of, there was a film on, again, during one of the lockdowns, and it was about the V1 and V2 bombers and missiles, as we know them now, in the Second World War. And it was about how the British worked out what was happening. And one of the things they utilized was 3D photography, which is two cameras next to each other in the bottom of a plane, so that they could have two photos and then they'd have like a bit of card between their eyes, and then they could see the height of something relative to the surrounding space. And that's when they started noticing weird, odd buildings they couldn't understand, because obviously no one had invented a missile or a rocket. Going back to what we were saying about connections, these things didn't exist. And then equally, something similar happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is, again, they used 3D photography, not because they had a special 3D camera, because they had two different cameras next to each other to give that stereoscopic view, to allow people to have, two different images that gave the illusion of the third dimension, which then allowed them spot that there were missiles that, obviously if you take a picture directly on top of a missile, you don't see a missile, you see a circle with a dot in the middle.
Yeah.
That's not very helpful. None of this helps you work out where the little chef is on the M4 on your journey. Because do you care? No, you don't. This is just... And the worst thing about it is it goes on for so goddamn long. As long as I've just whinged there.
I feel like they kind of hammer it home as well, because cartography to me is not a rush job, is it? Cartography it's something that people really take their time over, getting out all of is it theodolites, whatever they're called, and, traipsing across terrains and doing all sorts of measurements and things like that. Whereas in this, when they're discussing...
Well, that's why it's called the Ordnance Survey. It was a survey. They went out and surveyed the land.
In this, when he's discussing getting the photos and turning them into these maps, as he uses the following terms. He says, a map can be produced within a few hours. Photographs are processed and printed within minutes of being landed. And then he says that something happens, a vital work may be held up, so speed is essential. He doesn't explain why, and he doesn't explain why everything has to be quick or why speed has to be essential.
What vital work is being held up?
Unless you're, flying over, seeing what the enemy troops are doing at that particular moment. That's the only...
Yeah.
But at no point in this is any sort of military application mentioned. It's quite strange.
You're absolutely right. It is the dog that doesn't bark. It's quite clearly, the more we thought about it, the more obvious it became. It's like, this is how they used the photos from a U-2 plane flying over the Soviet Union to work out what they were up to. And they probably would need to know what was happening relatively quickly, and they wouldn't want to held up. But this is, again, this has nothing to do with your A to Z in the back of your parcel shelf in your car. Fading in the sun.
The other thing I found odd was that they felt the need to explain the basic concept of perspective.
Yes, and how do they do
that? So they were saying, oh well, the things in things that are closer in the photograph will appear larger, which is, I mean, this is Father Ted territory, isn't it? But they sort of demonstrate it by showing us two different booze adverts.
Not one.
So yet more.
Yeah.
Yet more booze advertising on the BBC. So now, after polishing off my glass of Johnny Walker Guinness and whatever that wine was,
the Austrian white wine.
I now have to have a bottle of John Courage and a glass of Cutty Sark, as advertised by what's his name, the Irish comedian who smoked. Dave Allen. Yeah, that was a young Dave Allen in that advert as well. Yeah. Why do they need that bit? Is it because it's near Christmas? They just feel the need to just put booze in all of the segments, or did they really think that people wouldn't understand the concept of perspective in photography?
But the thing is, it's like they confused perspective with false perspective, which is what those ads are. False perspective. They're designed to create an illusion.
Yeah.
It's like
because one of them's using a fisheye lens, isn't it?
Yeah, deliberately.
The Courage one's a fisheye lens,
Very wide eye. Absolutely to create the illusion of a larger drink, but also. That ad, is that the one with Dave Allen? That's the one that kind of revels in its own artifice. It's with the woman in the background, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, the Courage one is all sort of distorted, presumably to represent the fact that they're pissed, which you're probably not allowed to do these days.
Simpler times, yeah.
And then the Dave Allen one, he's holding the glass of whiskey right up to the camera.
Yeah, and that's the one that kind of celebrates the artifice of false perspective. And the whole time I was thinking, like, they are confusing, well, not confusing, but like they're confusing false perspective and perspective. Because like perspective is reality, but false perspective is where things get warped, but deliberately. And again, I go back to what I was saying earlier. None of this has anything to do with maps, which is all they won't shut up about maps.
Imagine how confusing it would be if you were back in the day and you bought your map book and it was just a big sheaf of photographs. with the little corners holding the pictures in and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like a proper album. It's my map album. So come on, kids, let's all have a look at the map album.
But I mean, even if okay,
I did wonder what you would research with this. Go on.
Even if this were how they made maps, the Americans launched their first surveying satellite, Landsat, in 1972, just 2 years later. And Landsat is like the main, like their sort of principal satellite program that they use for basically keeping an eye on the world. An eye on the world for like nice things that not non-military stuff. So,
yeah.
So ecological things and all that sort of stuff. And it can be used for mapping, but mapping is such a basic function that that actually it's more used for sort of like watching, I don't know, forest fires or glaciers melting or all of these sorts of things. And they're up to they've been launching them over the years. The new improved versions. They're up to Landsat 9 now, which they sent up there in 2021 September, and 7 and 8 are still working. And they contribute to everyone's favourite map, Google Earth. So Google Earth takes its maps from a variety of sources. There's lots of different satellite mapping people up there, but Landsat's one of the main ones, possibly because they're free. It's free to get these maps. But one of the things with Google Earth that I think a lot of people don't realise is that when you zoom in, you go, wow, I can see so much detail. I remember being so amazed by it when it first came out, and you could like zoom in on your flat, and like see it from, and you were thinking, I'm seeing my flat from space, but actually, no, you're not.
No, you're seeing it
because
from plane.
it's actually only satellite imagery to a certain point, and then once you get below a certain point, it's actually aerial photography. But obviously they don't care about. I don't think they really care about affecting the perspective or anything, because it obviously, as you say, makes no difference when you're that high up.
It's so minimal.
But but I mean, if you did want to actually do a proper height survey like they're trying to do in this, then you'd use our old friends LiDAR and radar that we've spoke about previously on the show.
Yep.
And they'll give you those depths to the nearest whatever inch or whatever. And it won't involve a guy who looks like a young Arthur Scargill sitting at a boring machine for 20 minutes doing nothing.
No.
A computer probably do it for us. But I do love a bit of Street View, though, don't you?
100%,
yeah. I think that is one of the marvels of our time. I suppose we do take it for granted, but I still do the thing where I go, I quite fancy going to that pub or that restaurant or something. And I'll just check it out on Street View to see whether it looks like worth going to.
Yeah.
It's so convenient.
It's also the house purchaser friend Street View. You get a real sense of an area where they're having to go somewhere. And I like spying in old places I used to live as well. To see what they've done with the place. No, do you know what? Having watched this, it has made me realise that I do slightly take for granted Google Earth and Street View and Google Maps and the Apple stuff as well. It was like when that first came in, that was incredible. The fact that it felt like you were in the heart of the CIA and you're able to spy on anyone. It's like the novelty's worn off.
Enhance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it's even things like, I lost my gran last year.
Did you find her on Street View?
She is on Street View still, Russ. Thank you, Russell. That's very sweet of you. No, I'm being quite serious. She's
really?
If you do the little slider, you can go back to the various different Street Views. She will forever be outside her house mowing the lawn.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I like that. I looked her up quite recently, actually, just to reassure myself that she was still there.
Yeah.
She's no longer with us, but she will permanently be
pulling a moonie at the
absolutely,
the car.
Yeah, flicking the V's. As the car went by.
You should always do with a Street View. Yeah,
that's my gran. Yeah. And I'm on there. I'm on Street View a few times. I found myself.
Oh, really?
Not deliberately.
We're in Hackney.
Yeah, in Hackney. Yeah. Once I'm definitely walking up the steps of the town hall, and I think I'm somewhere else as well. Outside the old house, I'm definitely on one of the old pictures somewhere. But and I wasn't even looking for myself. I was just like, oh, that's me, But then obviously every now and then you do see the car go by, and you do like, I locked that away. I must be there. Yeah, I must be on there soon. No, it is incredible, and it is something we now absolutely take for granted in our wanton materialistic ways that make us a dreadful generation.
Well, yeah. So, talking of dreadful behaviour.
Oh, shocking.
We get to some shoplifting.
Oy.
Christmas is not only the high season for shopping, but for shoplifting too. Already the Home Office has told us that this is the worst Christmas on record, and during last week's electricity cuts, shoplifting reached fantastic proportions. Experts from one of the big security organisations reckon that between now and Christmas up to £5 million worth of goods are going to be stolen. But next Christmas it could be different, as James Burke, now rapidly becoming our crime correspondent, is happy to demonstrate.
This week, for the first time, a new device is being shown in London. It's been designed by an American electronics expert, and it's already been installed in some of the leading New York chain stores and boutiques. And not just the cheap ones either. The big fashion houses are going for it too. It's basically a special doorway through which all the customers pass to go out into the street. And here in the studio, we've got a working model of the system. This is the doorway, and you pass through here. Now, here's a dress which I've paid for, and I go out through the doorway and go home with my dress I bought for my wife. Now, here's a dress I'm trying to nick, for which I have not paid. Watch. Right, how does it work? Well, it's not a metal detector. On the dress that I didn't pay for, there's a plastic price tag with a difference. Inside the tag, there's one of these, a tuned circuit, which requires no power supply. In the doorway, there's an aerial, and somewhere near the door, there's a transmitter. And on the model here, as a matter of fact, it's underneath. Now, within the door, there's a radio field, and when the tuned circuit is passed through this field, the transmitter is put under load, and that load activates the alarm system. Now, as you can see, the tuned circuit itself is very thin, and it can be personalized, as this one is, with the shop's own name. It's a shop in New York.
Basil, someone shoplifting. Do you think you'd be scared if you were shoplifting and you ran out the door and all you could hear was
Ding,
the set?
ding, ding.
Do you think you'd been chased by Robert Robinson?
I don't think I'd be threatened if Robert Robinson was trying to track me down like some kind of cold-blooded bounty hunter.
Another one of those ones, we've had a couple of them before, where it's something that we have seen almost every on a day-to-day basis.
Our entire lives,
our entire lives, and we're almost seeing the genesis of it. We're seeing
this is why I really enjoy doing this. Yeah, no, this is why, as much as we hoped and longed to find examples of tomorrow's world coming up with utter nonsense that went nowhere. Actually, I think we really were looking forward to things like this, where like something that we take for granted or have grown up with and is an ever-present part of our life being demonstrated for the very first time, being shown off. It's brilliant. I had a smile on my face all throughout this bit.
Yeah, especially as it's almost like the Burkenator is playing shop.
Yeah,
playing reverse shop.
Yeah.
And he's got a little miniature version of the doorway gate that would operate this security tag, and then he's passing the clothes through it and showing you what would happen if he had bought it and what would happen if you tried to nick it. And it's like a little perfect,
isn't he?
Yeah, little perfect representation.
It's a fabulous little model. It's wonderful. Yeah. And it's such a delightfully twee middle class alarm as well.
Yes, exactly.
It's joy.
Whenever I like these particular ones, I mean, you rarely see these days when you go into shops. You rarely see the massive plastic tag, do you? Like, unless I think sometimes you see. Do you see ones with dye on them sometimes these days? You do, don't you?
You do, yeah.
Maybe it's because I only shop in places like Primark and charity shops where they don't really tend to put them on. Do they put them on in the more expensive shops, Mark? Do they still put these big plastic tags on, or do they rely on something more subtle?
I recently went to an expensive shop and bought an expensive item of clothing, Russell, and no, they don't, because I have someone on the door to stop people from running out with things. You don't see them as much, actually. You don't. But then, I don't know, I probably do more shopping online. And obviously, they don't turn up in your house with the tags on.
Yeah, because
that's a fair observation. I'm not sure you do. You're right.
Because I always remember that the part of it that I never quite understood was it looked like, when I'm talking about the big chunky plastic ones like these ones that Burke has got, it looked like that they were so solidly put through the clothing that you couldn't work out how they were removed, and if it were removed, there would be a hole the size of like a 10p through the piece of clothes. And then you take it to the counter and they'd literally touch it on a machine, and suddenly the thing popped off and there was no hole in the clothing. So it seemed like a bit like witchcraft to understand how. But I don't understand how there was not like a sort of black market in whatever that machine is that undid them, or is it just a case that so much? I mean, I see in Burke's case, his one works on a slightly different principle, like where they actually break the
Yeah,
They break
yeah,
the
they're
device, don't
they're
they?
one-offs basically. Yeah,
They're one-offs.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the ones we always saw were reusable, weren't
yes,
they?
yeah.
But I don't know whether it requires so much force to undo it that they don't expect a human to have. You know what I mean? They don't expect to have the force in their hands to do it. So it has to be on a desk or
well, I mean,
something.
as somebody, when I worked at Millets, one of my jobs would be to attach those tags to items of clothing. They do make a hole, so you'd have to be... So, on some of the kind of the waterproof jackets...
Don't put them on the condoms.
No, you don't put them on condoms. That's a sketch, isn't it, from something, isn't it? Where somebody's going around mindlessly putting... So on the waterproof jackets, you wouldn't put it on the jacket, you'd put it on the zip bit, you know, the material next to the zip. And you'd have like a little kind of gun thing. So you'd have the elements, which is by the plastic tab, and then you'd have the little kind of like a giant thumbtack, drawing pin kind of thing that would slot in, and you'd have to really force it in. And then you're right, you obviously pull it off by putting it on the machine, which I think was magnets, but I'm not quite sure how it worked. But you could not pull apart the little metal pin from the plastic thing, no matter how much you tried. It was impossible. You had to use that machine.
That'd be great if like World's Strongest Man. That was one of the.
That was the final task.
Yeah. They ripped it. Had to rip in half a phone book and then remove a security tag from a dress.
And then lift a dress from Henri. What was the name of the place? Henri Bendel in New York.
Oh yeah, Henri Bendel, which
I'd never heard of.
Mark, I looked.
Oh, brilliant! Go on then.
So yeah, because we're showing the tag. This is a particular tag that he's using, isn't it?
Yeah, they obviously flown it over that day. On the 747 from New York. Pan Am,
all of their shops shut in 2018, Mark.
Oh wow!
So hopefully the tags, kept them going for 38 years longer than they expected.
I've never heard of
48 years
Bendel.
Long. No, it's quite a posh shop apparently.
Okay, cool.
But
because that was something I thought was interesting. He said like it's not the cheap shops, it's the expensive ones that have this. And as I was saying to you while you were watching it again, it's like, but that makes sense. Like it's the expensive shops that have stuff that people want, and B, they're the ones that have the money to install a brand new system. It was such a weird observation to me. Like the Primark, I don't know, I didn't get that.
Mark,
sorry.
The lower classes go to the cheap shops.
Oh,
and they're all thieving little scroats, aren't they?
I suppose they are, aren't they? Yeah. They're all urchins.
Exactly,
yeah,
yes.
That's true.
Stuffing handkerchiefs into their pockets.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing with this is once again, this is something that we've essentially covered in a previous episode, but a more advanced version.
Yes.
So you remember, if you remember back to episode whatever it was, where Howard was demonstrating.
That's right. Everyone at home, make sure you download episode whatever it was.
It was one of the ones with Howard in it.
It was, yeah.
And he was demonstrating RFID tags.
Yes.
And it's essentially the same principle, but it's just a less complex version. So whereas with the thing with an RFID tag is that when it goes through a electromagnetic field, it causes it to send out a radio signal that contains information, and it can be read. With this, if this thing, which Burke holds it up, actually, it's almost like a coil of what of printed wire.
He shows it to us. He exposes it.
When this goes through the field, it just emits a signal. It's no information in it. It's just a particular signal tuned to a particular radio frequency. And if the gateway detects that radio frequency, then the alarm goes off.
Yeah.
And then in order to stop that happening, you either remove the tag, or what happens these days, because they're still extensively used these days in your supermarkets and whatnot. But what happens these days is that the till is able to decommission it, like they're able to put it out of action. So because they're so cheap now, and they don't put them inside big plastic tags like this anymore. They literally print them into the barcodes and such like that. So if you ever peeled the barcode off of a bit of expensive meat in the supermarket, you'll probably see one of these cords, very incredibly similar to what old Burkinator holds up to the camera. But the key with these is that when it goes through the till gives off such a powerful magnetic wave that it causes a short circuit in this little circuit and deactivates it. So that's why sometimes if you scan your stuff too quickly through the self-checkout, it'll still set the alarms off at the door. So that's why you should always hold it over the self-checkout for a bit so that it gets magnetized and that deactivates it. Yeah, so I mean, it's a great thing. I mean, it's still used extensively. The other day I had to go and buy the other day, a couple of months ago, I had to go and buy a woolly hat in Decathlon. My local branch of Decathlon, the self-service tills now. So rather than scanning the barcode, the self-service tills are just like looks like a big sink, like a big metal sink. You just chuck your stuff in there, and then the till tells you what you've bought.
Yeah, they have them in Uniqlo here in town. Yeah,
I mean, it's very clever.
Yeah,
but the problem is that everyone walks in there hasn't got a clue what's going on, so they have to have a person standing there
to
explaining how it works.
Yeah.
So they might as well just have somebody on the till.
Yeah.
But I presume at some point, I mean that's just one step away from the. I think Amazon are.
Yeah, there's one here in Hackney. Yeah.
I think where you
just
go
in
out
and
shop.
you walk out and you get charged with whatever you walk out
and
with.
it detects all of it. It's all the same principle. It's just different, more or less complex versions of exactly the same principle.
Yeah.
In that it's taking an electric component through a magnetic field and that causing it to transmit. Even the thing I found out recently is they've got ones that are so small now they impregnate them into the paper that they use for top secret documents.
Oh,
because then you can't walk out of the building with that document because it'll set off an alarm.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, it's clever, isn't it? But yeah, no, that's it. And then once Burke's finished his shoplifting, it cuts back to old Raymondo briefly to sign us off. And he really wants to get to that Christmas party, doesn't he?
He is out of there.
And on that subject, next week we shall be back a day early, on Thursday, Christmas Eve, with a special edition of Tomorrow's World, including such seasonal reports as how to guarantee snow, whatever the weather, and a special section of the Monte Carlo Rally right here in the studio, in which I'll take on world champion driver Graham Hill. That's at 6:15 next Thursday, so until then, good night.
Yeah, I don't, where's he going? Do you think it's the Christmas party? I mean, it seems sensible, but then aren't they?
Yeah.
Don't they have another episode next week before Christmas? Probably not live though.
No, that's the thing. But what I do know, Mark, is that we're very much not Raymond Baxter because we
don't know
we're
how
not
to leave
dashing
early.
off, are we? No. We've still got an audit to get through.
I know we do. Shall we then?
Yes.
Let me just write down that. Okay, let's do it then. So, the year in context first, Russ. Tell us about the cinema box office.
Well, as explained many times in the past, cinema box office is impossible to get for
Don't forget my suggestion of you could do the films that are released.
I didn't forget your suggestion.
Oh, very good.
I didn't forget your suggestion. You suggested that I just say what was released around this time.
Yeah.
I don't know how many films were released every week back then. Was there only one film released a week back then?
Gosh, I mean,
it might be the case.
Was that around the time where, like, you know, a film would be released in one cinema one week and, like, it would go on tour, basically? Like, you might only see that film in 2 months after it's released in London when it finally hits your cinema.
So I've found a list of the films by release date in 1970 in Britain.
Okay.
So I will read the 10 up until this day.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got you. Okay.
Okay. So this goes back to the 2nd of November until the 17th of December. These are the films released. The Three Sisters.
Don't know that one.
Scars of Dracula. That sounds like Hammer, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
The Horror of Frankenstein. That sounds like Hammer, doesn't it?
That does as well.
The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer.
No.
Scrooge.
Okay.
The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes.
Yep.
Ryan's Daughter.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Song of Norway.
Oh, that sounds very arty.
Rio Lobo.
But no.
And The Wild Child.
Well, there you go.
So it seems like, it's a real... I think that's the most unknown box office we've ever done, isn't it?
Yeah, and obviously it isn't even the box office. None of those might have made any money because no one went to see them. The Rise of Rio Lobo, is that what it is? Was that what you said?
Rio Lobo.
Anyway, okay. Well, that was helpful.
It's a Howard Hawks film. It's a Howard Hawks film starring John Wayne.
Oh, okay. Pop chart.
Pop charts. Here we go. This is much more. Oof. I do know some of the songs in it though.
Okay.
Number 10, You've Got Me Dangling on a String by the chairman of the board.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9, My Prayer by Jerry Monroe. Number 8, Nothing Rhymed by Gilbert O'Sullivan. Number 7, Home Loving Man by Andy Williams. Number 6,
rock and roll happen?
This is a favourite of yours, Mark. Number 6, Grandad by Clive Dunn.
Effing loved that. First dance at my wedding.
I know a lot of people. I know obviously Dad's Army is a good sitcom, and I did used to enjoy it when I was a kid. Not really watched it as an adult.
Yeah.
But even as a kid, I always thought that Clive Dunn was almost ruining it. He's the worst. He's by far the worst character in it. Even though he's the most sort of famous and almost celebrated character in it, Jones is the worst character. All of the others are doing quite subtle, well-acted performances, and he just turns up and ruins loads of scenes.
In a sense,
to me.
I've never really liked Dad's Army, and I've watched it, and obviously there are elements that I genuinely respect and understand why it's so popular. But in a weird way, I think its fetishization of a specific period of time probably ill serves contemporary Britain. However, I've often wondered, because I agree with you, and I think we've probably discussed this before, I've often wondered if his character is the one that is most of its time, and so he's the least universal character. He's just an old man. But I suppose I wondered, did every Home Guard unit have someone like him who really should have aged out, but was in because
and ran around shouting, "Don't panic,
don't panic." Yeah,
don't like it up them.
and all the other hilarious catchphrases we love and admire. I've often wondered, if because in many ways, the rest are kind of universal archetypes that are true of anywhere you go, right? Except for him. And I just wonder if he's the most tethered to literally the Home Guard, as opposed to the Home Guard being the situation in a situation comedy, if that makes sense.
I just think it's a terrible performance.
Well, there is that. But thank God he had the pipes of an angel.
Number 5, the first song that I would properly listen to in the charts, I'll Be There by the Jackson 5.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good.
Number 4, It's Only Make Believe by Glenn Campbell. Number 3, Cracklin' Rosie by Neil Diamond. Number 2...
A lot of crooners in this.
Number 2, When I'm Dead and Gone by McGuinness Flint, which presumably Raymond Baxter would call Muck Irish Beer Flint. And number 1, I Hear You Knocking by Dave Edmonds.
Okay. I'm not sure that helps all that much. What about prices, Russ?
Here we go, Mark. Gallon of petrol, 6 shillings 8 pence.
Very
helpful.
helpful.
£3.67. Pint of beer, 2 shillings 11 pence, which is £1.60. 20 fags. 5 shillings 2 pence, which is £2.85. Pint of milk, a shilling 55p.
Yes, that's on the money.
Loaf of bread, a shilling 9 pence 96p. Ooh, a Bush black and white TV from Curry's.
Yeah.
70 guineas.
Stop making shit up, Russ.
Which is 800 quid. Copy of the Sun newspaper, 5 pence, with 23p. That's about, Sun's about something like that these days.
30p or something like that. I don't know.
Average house price, 4.5 grand, which is 50 grand these days. Full Cortina, £882, which is 9,700 these days. That's a good value. That would definitely be able to drive over those pipes.
The true test of an automobile.
Yeah. Single pack of Golden Wonder crisps, 7 pence, which is 32p. Fish and chips at the Little Chef. Who'd think we mentioned Little Chef?
What are the chances?
In that episode. Fish and chips at Little Chef, 5 shillings, which is £2.75.
Hey, that's not bad. Sure, it's perfectly fine. God, I hope you don't need a map to get there, because you're going to really struggle. Nothing in the Argos catalogue? Or is it too early? I can never
too
remember.
Early for Argos. Argos was a mere twinkle in Odysseus'
Argos'
eye.
mind. Odysseus, very good. Very good. Thank you, Russell. Thanks for the prizes. Let's get down to the audit proper then. Most important invention that we saw today.
Is it those pipes? Or is it? No. It's clearly the anti-shoplifting.
It has to be, yeah. I mean, one thing I was reflecting on recently is that we often write off things that just don't make it through. Where it's like, I wonder, should we almost rate them and like, God, if they were true, they'd be amazing. But regardless, it's the anti-shoplifting thing, which we've seen for the last 52 years. So in one form or another. So I'd agree with that. Most worthless inventions. There's a few to choose from.
There is.
Is it the Hastings Junior calculator, or is it the al dente plumbing on motorway central renovations?
Al dente. Yeah, they are both definitely useless. But I have far more, what's the word, good nature towards the Hastings.
The Hastings Junior. Yeah, you're right. That was done with a warm heart and yeah. So it's the bullshit central reservation nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the possibly criminal enterprise of trying to replace our perfectly good
big pipe
crash
buying
barriers.
out the BBC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Most inaccurate prediction of the future. Is there much projection into the future? I'm not sure there is.
Isn't really, is there?
I'm happy to move on from that one. I mean, if there is nothing, there's nothing. Worse screw up.
Hang on. Hang on.
Yeah.
Is it Raymond saying that there's 4 days to go until Christmas when clearly there's
We didn't even
a
discuss
week to go
that,
till
did
Christmas?
he? We didn't even discuss that. What is that all about? So right at the beginning of the program, he talks about so we know it's broadcast on the 18th, and he's
Friday the 18th.
Absolutely, and he talks about he's aware of that as well. And Friday the 18th is what? It's 8 days before Christmas.
It's exactly 1 week, so Christmas will be the following Friday.
Yeah. And then he talks about how they were recently in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, and they filmed this segment, which is the voice-operated booze operator, Sade's favourite segment. And he says, and because there's only 4 days to go, we thought now is the right time to broadcast it. And I sat there and I thought, what am I missing? I don't understand. What happens on the 22nd of December? So I even said to you, and says, what happens in 4 days' time? And you even did a little bit of logic solving. And because you rightly pointed out that they do celebrate Christmas early in Sweden, but only 1 day early. Like it's Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day. So what in God's name is he talking about?
He's only talking about working days, is my only suggestion. So he's talking about Monday to Thursday.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
But the weekend happens. The weekend's here.
Yeah, the weekend is days.
Yeah, the weekend is days.
Yeah, so I mean that's not much of an excuse, is it? So that's my late entry for the worst prediction.
No, I like it. And
is that Raymond doesn't know how days work.
Should we also say that's the worst screw up by a presenter?
No, I'd say that the worst screw up is that little kid not being able to operate the calculator properly.
That goddamn little goddamn screw. You're right.
He puts it on the wrong units, Mark, twice.
He's like an anchor dragging the show down. Yeah, you're damn right, Russ. Best attempt at making something boring interesting.
Well, I mean, crash barriers are quite. I mean, I don't think you could walk into a pub and start a conversation with somebody about crash barriers.
I think you're right. It was the first thing I thought of was also the crash barriers, because obviously it's nonsense and doesn't work, but yet we do get to see some slow motion car action, which always elicits a kind of
everyone loves a car crash, Mark. Watching videos of car crash. I spend whole evenings watching
Russian dashboard.
Russian dashcam.
It's always Russian dashboard. Yeah, absolutely. So that has to be it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it has to be. Yeah.
Best use of music? Is there any? There must be. Is there? No. There isn't, is there?
There is no music. No.
We'll struggle to answer that one then. Yeah,
tune,
I'm not going to accept that. Best or worst use of furniture?
I don't know whether will you accept that this is a piece of furniture, Mark? Hospital bed with a Perspex box on it.
Yeah, I damn well will accept hospital bed with a Perspex box. It's certainly the best use of a hospital bed with a Perspex box that I've seen. Most notable clothing. I forgot we added this.
Well, I would say the most notable clothing worn by a presenter, I would say, is the Burkenator's lovely floral tie.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
But I think unusually in this episode, we actually get clothing being used to demonstrate something.
Yes, we do.
So the most notable clothing is surely the clothing that Burkenator is trying to shoplift.
Pretend that he's bought for his wife. Doorway. Yeah, I absolutely perfect. Yep. Did we see anything in this episode that made it into the future? And there's a clear and obvious answer for yes, which is the last thing we see in the episode, which is has made it through.
And obviously voice control we see in the future, just not necessarily this.
We don't know what this is, and also like it's such a throwaway item. It's actually a bit sad, really, because.
But do you ever use voice? I would feel far too self-conscious to ask my phone to actually do anything, and I struggle to think of, unless a burglar had tied me to a chair and I needed to phone the police and my phone was on the floor across the room. It's the only conceivable reason I'd ever use the voice control.
Well, mine is switched off. I couldn't even do that. I mean, that aspect of my phone, I've never turned it on. No, I think it's mortifying. There's no way I would do it. I mean, I've seen people use it and actually use it as part of their daily life, and I can see how it works. But it doesn't. I've definitely seen people like, Siri or Alexa, can you time 30 minutes because they're cooking something, or they have, and especially if they have kids, like it is kind of, it's easy to throw out a phrase like that. But I kind of think to myself, like, it's not that much more to kind of open your phone and put on an alarm anyway.
No.
I don't think it does anything at the moment that is where the normal interface or the regular interface is so challenging that it's just easier to say it out loud. Because, I mean...
No, not at all, no.
So, no. And to be honest, I'm not even really comfortable using the genuinely effective and impressive audio feature on Google Translate. I feel embarrassed doing that, even though that is incredibly useful and often impressive. I mean, when myself and JC were in a sake bar in the middle of nowhere, and the guy came up with it to talk to us, and it worked. We knew what he said, and then we would say something back, and it would translate it, and he knew what we were, like, it was just, this is like one of those things where, like, this is the Babel fish, this is the TARDIS
universal translator.
Absolutely, this is incredible, and yet I never used my phone to do it because I just felt embarrassed. It's like, I'm sure I can get over that, but with the whole Alexa Siri thing, no, I'm good, thanks. I just don't think it adds anything, and they do spy on you, whether you want to believe it or not, they really do. Yeah, but it's weird because I thought that voice-operated things would have first appeared on this program a lot later than 1970.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And yet...
It's a big surprise.
And yet there it is, and it is just thrown away. Both by the inventor, who possibly doesn't understand what he's done, and by Raymond Burke, who doesn't seem that terribly impressed.
and kind of by us, because I only kind of just remembered that this...
Yeah,
this is one of the things that we'd looked at.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I suppose, that did make it into the future. What does this episode tell us about the 18th of December 1970? That Raymond Burke has places to go. We are in his way.
James Burke.
Oh, Raymond Baxter. God damn it. Raymond Baxter has places to go. And we are in his way. You're absolutely right.
Yes. Yeah. It is still, much like the episodes where we were born felt like the 70s, it still feels...
Like the 60s?
60s, but yeah. I suspect that's because it's in black and white.
Yeah.
It's inescapable for us to associate black and white with the, pre-70s era.
Yeah.
I think you were right earlier when you said that there's a sense that James Burke is bringing in has brought in and it will continue to bring in like a more of a sort of engaging and less authoritarian approach to presenting this kind of stuff. I think that the biggest thing I will remember from this episode is how impressed I was by James Burke.
Yeah, agreed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So maybe he's he's standing astride 1970, heralding a new era of understanding, much like the era of understanding between Elvis Presley and Richard Nixon.
Brilliant. Completing the circle, Russ. God damn. God damn, you're good.
Yeah. I genuinely just thought of that.
Oh no, I was aware. But that was very good. No, he it's wrong to say he's. I was going to say he's ushering in tomorrow's world future, but the reality is actually it's the first time we've seen him, but it's not the first time he's been on the show. He's been on the show for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
But this is the tomorrow's world that we're going to know. And yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I mean, that doesn't really tell us much about the 18th of December 1970. It tells us more about us and our podcast, but that's okay.
It does tell us that when we get, drunk and climb in our cars, because there's nothing to neutralise the alcohol.
Indeed.
Yet, we are going to crash into some lovely, safe Armco road barriers.
Which we have agreed are like a hug.
yeah, like a galvanised steel hug.
Oh, what a delight! Tomorrow's world tropes, Russ. Let's tick these boxes if we can.
Yeah.
Presenter having to speak over louder sounds? Thankfully, yes.
Once again, it's one of those ones where we were rescued at the very end.
Right at the arse end of the programme, yeah.
As James Burke had to talk over Robert Robertson enthusiastically introducing a new word.
Yeah, a new word.
A new word. Shoplifting.
Shoplifting.
I didn't mention. If you go on the Wikipedia article about anti-shoplifting devices,
is Robert Robertson
no, it's not on there. But the word that's constantly used, it's not shoplifting. Is not used on there very much. Pilferage.
I was going to say pilferage.
Pilferage,
I've never heard that. Pilfering.
It's as if pilferage or pilfering is some sort of technical term used in the security industry.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what it is? It's like
I do.
Because if you say, to me, pilfer sounds like something, an old one of the Cockney urchins would.
I mean, pilferage sounds like one of the little villages near where you grew up.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, no wonder your dad settled in and around that area. Hi, Roy. Pilferage, no, because that's one of those things where, like, an industry has to create lexicon to create a barrier of entry. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Stanley Kubrick reference only from Mossa I can think of.
Oh no.
You're a lovely observation about the idea of the lip reading robot.
Lip reading robots. Yeah. But
something to do with oil rigs? Nothing to do with oil rigs.
No.
Suspiciously obvious brand name on the ad-free BBC.
This is a trip across. This is a trip through the bar. This
is a riot of alcoholic brands.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's like standing in a branch of threshers.
Is that a reference the kids get? That Threshers is long gone, isn't it? Up there with Odd Bins and Sock Shop or whatever. Yeah, Guinness, Johnny Walker, the other ones you mentioned.
John Courage and Cutty Sark.
Cutty Sark. And obviously, what was the name of the New York shop?
Henri
Belen or whatever.
Henri Bellend, yeah.
Yeah, Henri Bendel. Bendel. It's probably Henry Bendel.
Henry Bendel, yeah.
Henry Bendel. Clear and blatant lying. Oh, right at the beginning of the last segment, Raymond Baxter mentions that the Home Office has already let it be known that shoplifting is worse this year than any year in history.
Well, doing that thing, as I mentioned, where he says that...
You're right.
This is the most...
Something I'm going to coin the Baxter crutch. As someone who used to work at the Home Office, I do not believe there is any way that the Home Office was able to produce live data about specific small individual crimes in real time and then provided to the BBC. I do not believe that for 1 second. I just think that is utter tosh. That's a lie. And I think that's a lie because he needed to use the Baxter crutch and he didn't have anything, so he just made something up.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Thank God.
I mean, it's bad to badmouth Baxter, but also the Burkenator saying that he said that machine was simple to use.
Simple and effective.
Simple and effective. And then proceeded to spend 10 minutes demonstrating that it was neither simple
it was
nor
neither
effective.
Simple nor effective, yeah. Evil farmers? No evil farmers.
No farmers.
Casual sexism? Yeah, there was. And again, like we're getting all these in the last item. Yeah, it's.
Oh yes, yeah.
Because I wrote down the quote. It's when James Burke attaches the tag to the clothes. He says, "Don't wince, ladies. The hole is no bigger than a normal price tag hole." Entirely unnecessary to drag women into this. Because I had forgiven him the moment where he talks about like when he's throwing the dresses through the mini arch. He talks about how, like, he basically pretends he's role-playing that he's bought his wife a dress. And I think that's okay, fine. Yeah, I've got no problem. I mean, I wouldn't buy my wife clothes because that's quite an audacious thing to do, unless she wanted something specific. It's such a weird thing. The idea that you'd go out and go like, I'm going to buy you clothes and you're going to wear them. It's like it is quite a power trip. I forgave him that, but not the don't wince ladies. I thought that was really patronising and sexist in an otherwise stellar performance from Burke.
Yeah.
Because you almost get the impression that they don't think any women watch this. This is a man's program, isn't it? There were no Dutch angles that I remember. Do you remember any Dutch angles?
No.
No items presented from a gantry.
No.
Episode ends in a damp squib. No. Unless you think running off before the camera's finished.
I mean, if anything, that firework, if anything, he's got off like a rocket.
Yeah, that's true.
The absolute opposite of a damn squid.
It made me think, like, where the hell's he got to go? Which I've never really thought about before. Willard and McCann abroad? No one's abroad. Oh, they go to Sweden? No, hang on.
Oh, hang on a minute. They're all abroad.
They're all abroad. Baxter's in Sweden.
No, actually, that was something I did think that Baxter is unnecessarily in Sweden, isn't he?
Yes.
Really?
Well, he's there for something else. He does say they were there recording for something else.
Oh, is that what?
Yeah, and then they did this bit. Yeah, right. But also, I think this whole trope bit is literally the idea that during the generation or during the epoch of Willard and McCann, they were the only ones allowed abroad.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point of it. Yeah.
All right. Any lasers or magnets?
Magnets, Mark. Magnets.
Definitely magnets. There's no lasers.
I said magnets, Mark, and then I started to think of that Madness song.
Magnets. They called it magnets.
It's magnets.
Well, there we go. That's that episode. That was a very enjoyable one, I thought.
Yeah, great stuff. It's nice to see something that early, and as I said, it's lovely to see the Burkenator in action.
Why Burkenator and not Burkminster?
I think it's just.
I think part of the reason is because I think part of the reason I've confused Burke and Baxter is because you've got Burkenator in my head, which sounds too much like Baxter.
Burkminster sounds more like Baxter.
No, Burkminster is like Burkminster Fuller.
Yeah, but it's in stir.
I might just call him James Burke.
Well, you called him Raymond Burke throughout most of the episode.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I've decided that there's too much criminality in the world. I've decided that much like Elvis wanted to become a drug enforcement agent, I want to become a anti-shoplifting security guard. So I've written my letter to the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, and I'm going to get on my canal boat now. I'm going to get my way to The Hague. So I'll let you get back to your Nixon biographies.
I have a couple on the go at the moment. Yeah,
and your Kilroy videos. And we'll bid you farewell. We'll bid the listeners farewell. So it's goodbye from me, goodbye from you, and we will see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.